The Secret Garden of Starlight, the gentle beginning. Let yourself settle now, wherever you are. Let your body sink a little deeper into softness. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. This moment is yours, and it is peaceful. Tonight, I want to tell you about a garden. Not an ordinary garden, but one that exists in that quiet space between waking and dreaming, where moonlight turns silver and stars hum gentle songs that only the heart can hear. This is a story about rest, about finding a place where the world grows soft around you, where time moves like honey, slow and sweet, and where every breath you take brings you deeper into calm. So breathe with me now, slowly, gently. Let the day fall away like autumn leaves, drifting down to soft earth below. There once was a traveler. Perhaps it was you. This traveler had journeyed far, not necessarily in distance, but in the way that living asks us to journey. Through days that felt too long, through moments that required too much, through all the small weights we carry without even noticing we're carrying them. The traveler was tired. The good kind of tired, the kind that knows it's time to rest. The kind of tired that makes you ready to let go. And on this particular evening, as the sun melted into the horizon like butter on warm bread, painting the sky in shades of rose and lavender and the softest amber gold, the traveler found themselves walking along a path they'd never noticed before. It was an old path, overgrown with wild grasses that whispered in the evening breeze. The air was growing cool but not cold, that perfect temperature that makes you want to wrap yourself in something soft, that makes you sigh with relief as the heat of the day finally releases its hold. The traveler walked slowly, with no destination in mind. Sometimes the best journeys are the ones without a map, without a purpose beyond simply moving forward, simply being. Overhead, the first stars were beginning to appear. Not suddenly, but gradually, like shy creatures emerging from hiding. One star, then another still, until the deep blue of the evening sky was scattered with tiny points of light, each one ancient, each one impossibly far away, each one somehow still reaching across space and time to offer its gentle glow. The moon was rising too, full and round, cream-colored, luminous. The kind of moon that makes you stop and stare, that makes you feel small in the best possible way, small and held by something vast and beautiful. The path curved gently through a grove of trees, old trees with thick trunks and branches that reached toward each other like friends holding hands. Their leaves rustled with a sound like distant rain, a sound like a lullaby, a sound that spoke of peace and shelter and safety. The traveler noticed how the moonlight filtered through the branches, creating patterns of silver and shadow on the ground. Light and dark, dancing together, neither one more important than the other. Both necessary, both beautiful. And then, quite suddenly, but also as if it had always been there, the traveler saw something unusual. There, just off the path, nearly hidden behind a curtain of trailing willow branches and climbing roses, was a gate. It was unlike any gate the traveler had ever seen. Made of wrought iron that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, it was covered in delicate patterns, vines and flowers, stars and crescent moons, tiny birds frozen in flight. The metalwork was so intricate, so detailed, that you could look at it for hours and keep discovering new elements, new stories woven into its design. But here was the strange thing. The traveler felt certain they had walked this path before, many times perhaps, and they had never seen this gate, never even noticed the space where it stood. As the traveler drew closer, they understood why. The gate itself seemed to be made partly of moonlight, partly of shadow, partly of something else entirely, something that existed only in that threshold time between day and night, when the world shimmers with possibility. It was beautiful, more than beautiful. It was calling, not with a voice but with a feeling of welcome, a feeling of home. The gate had no lock, no chain, no barrier except its own closed presence. But set into the iron, right at eye level, was a small brass plaque, weathered with age but still readable in the moon's gentle light. The traveler leaned closer to read the words engraved there. The Secret Garden of Starlight, for those who need rest. Open only under the moon's blessing. Enter in peace, leave in peace, and find what you have been seeking. The traveler's heart, which had been tight for so long, though they hadn't quite realized it, began to soften. Something about these words, something about this moment, felt like permission. Permission to rest. Permission to stop. Permission to simply be. They reached out, almost without thinking, and their fingers found the gate's cool handle. It felt smooth under their touch, warmed slightly by their skin, solid and real, and somehow also dreamlike. The gate swung open without a sound. No creak, no groan, just a smooth, graceful arc, as if the hinges were made of silk rather than metal. Beyond the gate, a soft pathway glowed. Not brightly, but with a gentle luminescence, like pearls or opals catching candlelight. The path seemed to be made of pale stones, each one smooth and round, each one emanating its own subtle light. The air that drifted through the open gate was different from the air outside. It smelled of night-blooming jasmine and something sweeter still, something the traveler couldn't quite name. Perhaps starlight had a scent after all, cool and pure and infinite. The traveler stood at the threshold for a long moment, feeling the invitation of the path, feeling the day fall away like a heavy coat being lifted from tired shoulders. And then, with a breath that released more than just air, released worry, released tension, released the need to be anything other than exactly this, exactly here, the traveler stepped through the gate and into the secret garden of starlight. Behind them, the gate swung gently closed, but not with a sense of being trapped. No, it felt more like a door being quietly shut against the chaos of the world, creating a sacred space, a sanctuary, a pocket of peace. The traveler turned to look back once and saw something wonderful. Through the iron patterns of the gate, the world beyond seemed distant now, softened, as if seen through water or mist. Still there, still real, but separate, safe on the other side of the threshold. Here, in this garden, time moved differently. The first steps into wonder. The traveler stood very still for a moment, just breathing, just being. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply pause and let ourselves arrive fully in a new place. The pathway stretched ahead, winding gently between shapes that were slowly becoming clearer as the traveler's eyes adjusted to the garden's particular kind of light. This was not the harsh light of day, nor the flat darkness of night, but something in between, a soft, silvery illumination that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The stones beneath the traveler's feet were smooth and slightly warm, as if they had been holding sunlight all day and were now releasing it slowly, gently, like a gift offered without expectation. Each step felt cushioned, supported, easy. The traveler noticed that their footsteps made almost no sound, just the softest whisper of movement, the quietest acknowledgement of presence. On either side of the path, the garden was beginning to reveal itself in the most wonderful way. There were flowers, but not like any flowers the traveler had seen before. They grew in clusters and cascades, in gentle drifts and careful arrangements, and each bloom seemed to hold its own small light within. Some glowed pale blue, like moonlight captured in petals. Others shimmered with the softest gold, warm as candlelight, gentle as a smile. Still others held shades of violet and silver, rose and pearl, each color muted and dreamy, each hue designed not to startle or excite, but to soothe, to calm, to ease the eye and quiet the mind. The traveler bent closer to one cluster of flowers and saw that their petals were semi-transparent, delicate as silk, and within each bloom, tiny particles of light drifted slowly, like dust motes in a sunbeam, like stars in a very small sky. The flowers swayed slightly, though there was no breeze, or perhaps they moved to a rhythm the traveler couldn't quite hear, some ancient song of growth and peace and patient becoming. These were called moonbell flowers, though the traveler didn't know that yet. They grew only in this garden, only under starlight, and they bloomed to help weary souls find rest. Their scent was subtle, a hint of vanilla, a whisper of lavender, the faintest suggestion of rain on stone. Nothing overpowering, just enough to say, "You are safe here, you can rest here, you are welcome here." The traveler straightened and continued walking, following the path as it curved gently to the left. There was no hurry. Time felt different here, stretched out like warm taffy, each moment lasting as long as it needed to, each second expansive and unhurried. Above, the sky was magnificent. The stars were brighter here than they had been outside the gate, not harsh or glaring, but fuller, more present, as if each star had moved just a little closer to offer its light more generously. The moon sailed serenely overhead, and the traveler could see its face clearly, the ancient seas and mountains, the quiet craters, all that vast stillness held in its round embrace. The path led past a grove of trees that took the traveler's breath away. They were unlike any trees that grew in the ordinary world. Their trunks were smooth and pale, almost luminous, like birch trees made of moonstone. Their branches spread wide and graceful, reaching upward and outward in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly intentional, the way everything in nature manages to be beautifully organized without trying. But it was what hung in the branches that made the traveler stop and stare in wonder. Starlight. Actual starlight, somehow caught and held in the leaves and branches like dew, like spider webs strung with drops of light. Tiny particles of luminescence drifted slowly through the canopy, floating down like the gentlest snow, like dandelion seeds on a summer afternoon, like wishes taking their time to find the ground. The traveler reached out a hand, and one of these particles of starlight drifted down to rest on their palm. It was cool but not cold, and it tingled slightly, pleasantly, like the feeling of static electricity but softer, kinder. The particle glowed there for a moment, pulsing gently like a heartbeat, like a tiny living thing made entirely of light and peace. Then it dissolved slowly, sinking into the traveler's skin, filling them with a sensation of deep, cellular calm. The traveler felt something release in their chest, some tightness they'd been holding, some knot they'd forgotten was even there. Their shoulders dropped, their jaw unclenched. Their breath came easier, deeper, fuller. This was the magic of the garden, though it wasn't magic in the loud, flashy way we often imagine. It was quiet magic, the magic of letting go, the magic of being held, the magic of rest. The traveler walked beneath the starlight trees, and more particles drifted down, landing on their hair, their shoulders, their upturned face. Each one brought the same gift: release, ease, peace. The accumulated tensions of days and weeks and months and years were gently being lifted away, particle by particle, like darkness being replaced by light, so gradually you hardly notice it's happening until suddenly you realize. You feel lighter. You feel softer. You feel more yourself than you have in a very long time. The path continued, winding deeper into the garden, and the traveler followed, trusting now, surrendering to the journey. They passed flower beds where blooms opened and closed in slow rhythm, breathing like lungs, like waves on a shore. They passed clusters of plants with leaves that seemed to be made of hammered silver, catching the moonlight and reflecting it in patterns that shifted and flowed like water. There were sounds in the garden, but all of them were gentle. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant tinkle of water over stone, a sound almost like music, but so faint it might have been imagination. Wind chimes perhaps, very far away, or bells the size of seeds, or the stars themselves humming their ancient songs. The traveler noticed small details as they walked. The way moss grew on some of the stones, thick and soft as velvet, glowing faintly green. The way certain flowers seemed to lean toward the path, as if acknowledging each person who passed, offering silent welcome. The way the air itself felt silky against skin, gentle and caressing, like being wrapped in the finest fabric. Everything in the garden was designed for one purpose: peace. Every element, every plant, every stone, every shadow and light, all of it working together to create a space where the tired could rest, where the worried could release their burdens, where anyone who needed sanctuary could find it. The path opened into a slightly wider area, a sort of clearing, and here the travelers saw their first glimpse of water. It was a small pond, perfectly round, its surface so still it looked like polished silver, like a mirror, like liquid moonlight poured into a bowl made of earth and stone. The edges of the pond were ringed with more flowers, these ones even paler than the others, almost white, almost transparent, growing in a perfect circle like a crown, like a blessing. The traveler approached the pond slowly, reverently, sensing that this was a special place even within this special place. The water's surface reflected the sky perfectly, the moon, the stars, the deep velvet darkness between them. But as the traveler looked closer, they saw something extraordinary. The reflection wasn't just a mirror image. The stars in the water seemed to have their own depth, their own dimension, as if the pond were not shallow but infinitely deep, as if by looking into it, you could see all the way down through water and earth and space to the actual stars themselves, hanging in their eternal positions, burning their ancient fires. It was beautiful. It was dizzying in the gentlest way. It was like looking at forever, but forever made small enough to hold in your gaze, close enough to touch, present enough to feel. The traveler knelt at the pond's edge, the glowing stones of the path warm beneath their knees. They could see their own reflection now, wavering slightly in the water, but softer than usual, gentler, as if the pond showed not just what you looked like but something deeper. who you truly were beneath the layers of exhaustion and worry, beneath the masks we all wear, the versions of ourselves we present to the world. The traveler looked peaceful in the reflection. Younger somehow, more at ease. The face looking back at them was their own face, but rested, restored, as if showing them a possibility, a promise. This is who you are when you let yourself truly rest. The traveler sat back on their heels, gazing at the pond, feeling the starlight trees behind them continuing their gentle rain of luminous particles, feeling the flowers breathing their slow rhythms, feeling the vastness of the night sky pressing down like a soft blanket, protective and warm. And in the stillness, in the peace, they heard something, or felt something, a presence, not frightening, not intrusive, but there nonetheless. A sense that they were not alone in the garden, that someone, or something, was here with them, watching over them, keeping them safe. The traveler wasn't afraid. Somehow, they knew that whatever presence shared this garden with them was kind, was gentle, was here only to help, to guide, to offer comfort. They stood slowly, brushing their hands on their clothes, though there was no dirt to brush away. The garden was too clean, too pure for anything like ordinary dirt. And as they stood, they looked around, searching for the source of that feeling, that gentle presence. And there, just beyond the pond, where the path continued into another grove of softly glowing trees, the traveler saw a figure. Waiting, patient, still as the stones, peaceful as the water, gentle as the starlight. The caretaker of the Secret Garden of Starlight had appeared. The caretaker's welcome. The figure stood perfectly still, as if they had been there for centuries, or perhaps had just materialized from the moonlight itself. It was impossible to tell, and somehow it didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling that radiated from them: warmth, safety, infinite patience, and a kindness so deep it seemed to be woven into the very fabric of their being. The traveler couldn't quite make out all the details at first. The figure seemed to shimmer slightly at the edges, as if they existed partly in this world and partly in some other, gentler realm. They were dressed in robes that might have been woven from mist and starlight, in shades of silver and pale blue and the softest gray, colors that shifted and flowed like water, like smoke, like dreams taking shape. But the face was clear. Neither young nor old, neither one thing nor another, but somehow both and everything in between. A face that had smiled 10,000 times and wept 10,000 more and found peace in all of it. Eyes that held the depths of the night sky, warm and endless and full of understanding. A presence that made you feel instantly and completely that you were seen, you were known, and you were loved exactly as you were. The caretaker smiled. It was the kind of smile that makes everything feel right, that makes you remember you are not alone, that makes you want to smile back even if you're not sure you remember how. "Welcome," the caretaker said, and their voice was like everything gentle in the world given sound, like rain on leaves, like wind through tall grass, like the last notes of a lullaby fading into sleep. "Welcome to the Secret Garden of Starlight. You've been traveling for so long. I'm so glad you found the gate." The traveler felt tears spring to their eyes, though they weren't quite sure why. Perhaps it was the recognition in those words. Yes, they had been traveling for so long. Perhaps it was the relief of being welcomed, of being expected, of being told that their arrival was a good thing. Perhaps it was simply the acknowledgement that they were tired, that they needed rest, that it was okay to need rest. The traveler began, but found they didn't quite know what to say. Who they were seemed less important here than how they felt. And how they felt was exhausted, overwhelmed, ready to let go. "I know," the caretaker said gently, and there was no need for explanations, no need for words to fill the space. "Everyone who comes here carries their own journey. You don't need to tell me about it unless you want to. Here, you can simply be. Simply rest. That's what this garden is for." The caretaker moved closer, and the traveler saw that they walked without quite seeming to touch the ground, or perhaps they did touch it, but so lightly that there was no disturbance, no displacement, just a flowing movement like water finding its path, like air moving through spaces. "Would you like me to show you the garden?" the caretaker asked. "There are many places here, many paths, many quiet corners designed for different kinds of rest. We can walk slowly. We can stop whenever you wish. There is no hurry, no schedule, no demands. Time here moves as you need it to move." The traveler nodded, finding that simple gesture easier than words. "Good," the caretaker said, and extended a hand, not to take the traveler's hand, not to lead or pull or direct, but simply to gesture, to indicate the path, to offer guidance without force. "Let's walk together. The garden has been waiting for you." They began to move along the path, the traveler and the caretaker side by side, with space enough between them for comfort, for separateness, but close enough that the traveler felt accompanied, felt held by presence without being crowded. The glowing stones of the path seemed to brighten slightly under their feet, as if pleased to have purpose, pleased to lead somewhere, to guide someone home to rest. The garden grows what each visitor needs, the caretaker explained, their voice soft and unhurried, falling into the rhythm of their walking, becoming part of the garden's gentle symphony of sounds. What you see here, another person might see differently. The starlight trees you passed under, did they release their light for you? Yes, the traveler said, finding their voice, discovering it came easier now. It felt like something was being lifted away. That's exactly what it is, the caretaker said, and their smile deepened. The trees gather starlight over many nights, over centuries of nights, and they hold it until someone who needs it passes beneath them. Then they release it, and the starlight carries away what you no longer need to hold. Worries, fears, the weight of too many responsibilities, the exhaustion of trying to be everything for everyone. Little by little, the starlight lifts it all away. The traveler felt a surge of gratitude so strong it was almost painful. To be understood like this, to have their weariness acknowledged, honored, tended to. It was a gift beyond measure. They walked on, passing more flowers, more glowing plants, more impossible beauty designed entirely for peace. The caretaker pointed out different elements as they went, their voice never rising above that gentle, soothing tone, each word carefully chosen to inform without overwhelming, to share without demanding attention. These flowers here, the caretaker said, gesturing to a bed of blooms that seemed to pulse with soft golden light, these are called dreamweaver blossoms. They help quiet the mind. If you breathe in their scent, gently just a little, they help stop the endless loop of thoughts that sometimes keeps us awake. They remind us that thinking can wait, that problems will still be there tomorrow if we need to face them, but for now, for right now, we can set them down. The traveler paused and breathed in carefully. The scent was subtle, honey and chamomile and something else, something that smelled like contentment, if contentment had a fragrance. Almost immediately, they felt their mind begin to slow, the constant chatter of thoughts growing quieter, like voices moving into another room, still there but distant, no longer demanding attention. Better? The caretaker asked, and the traveler nodded, surprised at how quickly the effect had come, how gentle and natural it felt. They continued walking, and the path led them past a series of small alcoves, set into what appeared to be low garden walls made of smooth, pale stone. Each alcove held something different, a small fountain where water trickled over crystals, making the faintest tinkling music. A cushioned bench surrounded by curtains of trailing vines that created a sense of shelter, of privacy, of safe enclosure. A circle of stones arranged around a small fire that burned without smoke, its flames pale blue and mesmerizing, dancing in patterns that seemed to follow some ancient choreography. The garden has many spaces for different needs, the caretaker explained. Some visitors need the sound of water. Others need softness, places to sit and be held. Some need the focus of fire, something to rest their eyes on while their minds unwind. You can visit any of these spaces whenever you wish. Nothing here will hurt you. Nothing here asks anything of you. The traveler found this almost difficult to believe. A place that asked nothing, that only offered? It seemed too good to be true. And yet, here it was. Real. Present. Surrounding them with its gentle magic, its patient care. Why does this garden exist? The traveler asked, the question surprising even themselves. The caretaker was quiet for a moment, considering. They had stopped walking now, standing in a place where the path widened slightly, where the starlight seemed to gather and pool like liquid silver. Because rest is sacred, the caretaker finally said. Because the world asks so much of everyone, and sometimes there needs to be a place that asks nothing at all. Because exhaustion is a kind of wound, and wounds need tending. Because everyone deserves a place where they can let down their guard, release their burdens, and simply exist without judgment, without expectation, without fear. The caretaker turned to look at the traveler fully, and those deep, starlit eyes held such compassion that the traveler felt something crack open in their chest. Not painfully, but like a door that had been locked for too long finally, gently opening. "You've been so strong," the caretaker said softly. "You've carried so much. You've kept going when it would have been easier to stop. And all of that is admirable, truly. But strength isn't just about carrying on. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to rest. Knowing when to say, I need help. I need peace. I need to stop, just for a while, and let myself be held. The traveler felt those tears again, and this time they didn't try to stop them. They fell, warm and clean, down their cheeks, and the caretaker didn't move to wipe them away or hush them or make them stop. The caretaker simply stood there, present, allowing the tears to be what they were, a release, a letting go, a small return to softness. "It's all right," the caretaker murmured. "Tears are welcome here. Everything you feel is welcome here. This is a place of acceptance, of allowing, of being exactly what you are in this moment without needing to be anything more." The traveler nodded, breathing shakily, feeling the tears slow and then stop, leaving them feeling lighter, cleaner, more present than they had felt in longer than they could remember. "Thank you," they whispered. "No thanks are needed," the caretaker said with gentle firmness. "This is what the garden is for. What I am for. I am simply the caretaker, the guide. The garden itself does the healing. Shall we continue? There is so much more I'd like to show you, and the night is long and kind, and we have all the time you need." The traveler took a deep breath, fuller now, easier, and nodded. "Yes, please." And together they walked on, deeper into the secret garden of starlight, where every step took the traveler further from the world of demands and worry, and closer to the center of peace, the heart of rest, the place where healing happens in whispers and starlight, and the gentle unfolding of permission to finally let go. The path curved ahead, leading towards something the traveler couldn't quite see yet, some new wonder waiting in the silvery darkness, and they found themselves eager to discover it, to see what other gifts this impossible, beautiful garden held. The caretaker walked beside them, steady and sure, a presence of infinite patience, and the traveler realized something that made them smile. They were not alone. And perhaps they had never truly been alone. Perhaps rest and peace and care had always been waiting, just behind a gate they hadn't known was there, in a garden that had always existed, ready to welcome them home. The garden of gentle luminescence. The path led them through an archway formed by two trees whose branches had grown together overhead, intertwining in patterns so perfect they seemed deliberate, as if the trees themselves had decided long ago to create this doorway, this threshold between one part of the garden and another. As the traveler passed beneath the arch, they felt something shift, not dramatically, not startling, but like passing from one room into another, each with its own particular quality of peace, its own specific kind of rest. This new section of the garden glowed more brightly, though brightly wasn't quite the right word. Richly might be better, or deeply. The luminescence here was fuller, more saturated, like the difference between a candle and a lantern, still gentle, still soft, but somehow more present, more aware of itself. "This is the garden of gentle luminescence," the caretaker said, their voice carrying a note of particular fondness, as someone might speak of a favorite room in a beloved home. "Here, the plants have learned to hold light in different ways. Some glow steadily, like breathing. Others pulse slowly, like heartbeats. And some flicker like distant stars, like memories of light rather than light itself. People come here when they need to remember that even in darkness, there is always light. Always." The traveler looked around and felt their breath catch, not in anxiety, but in wonder. The flowers here were larger than those they'd seen before, some as big as dinner plates, others the size of cupped hands. Each bloom was luminous from within, as if someone had placed a gentle lamp inside each petal, each stamen, each delicate curve of plant matter. There were flowers in shades of cream and ivory that glowed like pearls held up to moonlight. There were blossoms in the palest pink, like the inside of seashells, like dawn just beginning to think about breaking. There were flowers in lavender and periwinkle that seemed to hold entire twilight skies in their petals, shifting subtly from blue to purple to something in between. And the way they glowed, it was hypnotic in the gentlest sense. Some pulsed slowly, growing brighter, and then dimmer, and then brighter again, in a rhythm that felt like breathing, like tides, like the ancient, patient heartbeat of the earth itself. Others held their light steady, constant as hope, faithful as stars. Still others flickered almost imperceptibly, like candles in still air, creating the sense of something alive, something aware, something paying attention. "You can touch them if you like," the caretaker said. "They won't harm you. In fact, they like to be touched. They respond to kindness, to gentleness. They recognize when someone needs comfort." The traveler reached out hesitantly and brushed their fingertips against the petal of a large flower that glowed soft gold. The petal was cool and smooth, like silk that had been kept in a shaded room, and at the touch, the flower's glow intensified slightly, warmly, as if pleased, as if welcoming. A sensation traveled up the traveler's arm, not electric, not tingling, but warm, deeply warm, the kind of warmth that starts in your core and spreads outward, the kind that makes you realize you were cold without knowing it, tense without acknowledging it. The traveler felt their shoulders drop another inch, felt their spine lengthen and soften at the same time, felt something in their lower back, tight for months, maybe years, begin to release, to let go, to remember what it felt like to be easy, to be loose, to be free of chronic holding. The flowers share their light, the caretaker explained, watching with those kind, knowing eyes. When you touch them, they give you some of what they are: peace, rest, the ability to simply glow with your own light instead of constantly striving, constantly pushing, constantly trying to be more than you already are. The traveler moved from flower to flower, touching each one gently, and each flower responded with its own particular gift. One filled them with a sense of deep calm, like floating in warm water under a summer sky. Another brought a feeling of quiet joy, the kind that doesn't need a reason, that simply exists because existence itself is enough. A third flower, pale blue and flickering like starlight, filled them with a sense of connection, to the earth, to the sky, to all living things, to the vast web of being that holds everything in its tender, invisible embrace. Between the flowers, the path continued, and growing along its edges were smaller plants that glowed in different ways. Some had leaves that were edged in light, as if outlined by the finest silver thread. Others had stems that seemed to be made of captured moonbeams, translucent and luminous. There were tiny flowers, no bigger than the traveler's thumbnail, that glowed in clusters like handfuls of stars scattered across the ground. And everywhere that sound, or not quite sound, that sense of music that was more feeling than hearing. As if the light itself was singing, as if luminescence had a voice, and the voice was saying, "Rest, rest, you can rest now, you are safe, you are held, you can let go." The caretaker led them to a place where the path widened into a circular clearing, and in the center of this clearing was something extraordinary. It was a tree, but calling it simply a tree was like calling the ocean simply water, technically true, but missing so much of the truth. This tree was ancient, massive, its trunk as wide as a small house, its bark silver white and smooth as bone worn by centuries of touch. Its branches spread in all directions, creating a canopy that seemed to hold up the sky itself, and hanging from every branch, from every twig, from every leaf were lights. Not lanterns or lamps or anything made by hands, but pure light, droplets of it, like dew made of luminescence, like stars that had descended from the heavens to rest in this tree's embrace. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, more than could be counted, each one glowing with its own soft radiance, each one pulsing gently, each one contributing to an overall effect that was breathtaking, overwhelming in the best possible way. The traveler stood at the edge of the clearing and simply stared, unable to find words, unable to do anything but look and feel and be present to this impossible beauty. "The heart tree," the caretaker said softly. "The center of the garden. The oldest living thing here, and the source of much of the garden's magic. It has been growing for longer than anyone can remember, fed by starlight and moonlight and the tears and laughter of everyone who has ever sought rest here. It holds all of it, all the sorrow, all the joy, all the exhaustion, all the peace. And it transforms it all into light." The traveler took a step forward, then another, drawn as if by invisible threads, as if the tree were calling them, welcoming them, inviting them to come closer. The ground beneath the heart tree was covered in moss, thick and soft as the finest carpet, glowing with that same pale green luminescence they'd seen earlier. It looked like the most comfortable bed in the world, like something you could sink into and never want to leave. "You can sit," the caretaker said, "or lie down if you prefer. The moss is softer than any pillow, warmer than any blanket. And the tree will share its peace with you. You need only rest beneath it and let yourself receive." The traveler didn't need to be told twice. They moved to the base of the great tree, where its massive roots created natural seats and reclining places, smoothed by time and touch into curves that seemed designed for bodies, for rest, for surrender. They sat, and the moss was everything the caretaker had promised, soft beyond imagining, welcoming, warm. They leaned back against the tree's trunk, and the bark was smooth and warm too, not rough or harsh but gentle, yielding slightly, as if the tree itself was made partly of solid matter and partly of something more forgiving, more aware, more alive in a way that ordinary trees were not. Above them, the lights in the branches swayed gently, though there was no wind. They moved in patterns, in rhythms, in choreography that seemed to be responding to something, perhaps to the traveler's breathing, perhaps to their heartbeat, perhaps to some deeper pulse that connected all living things. The traveler watched the lights dance and felt their breathing slow even further, felt their heartbeat grow steady and calm, felt their entire body beginning to synchronize with the tree, with the garden, with the quiet pulse of peace that permeated everything. "The tree is listening to you," the caretaker said, and they had settled nearby, sitting on another root, their presence close enough for comfort, but not so close as to intrude. "It knows what you need. It's learning your rhythms, your patterns, the places where you hold tension, the places where you carry pain. And slowly, gently, it's beginning to offer you what would help." The traveler didn't quite understand what that meant, but they didn't need to. They simply let themselves sink deeper into the moss, deeper into the support of the tree, deeper into the moment. And then they felt it, a sensation starting at their back, where their spine pressed against the tree. Warmth, but not just warmth. Something more specific. It was as if the tree was sending energy or light or healing, some force that didn't have a name in ordinary language, directly into the places that needed it most. The chronic tightness in their lower back began to melt like ice in summer sun. The knot between their shoulder blades, present for so long they'd stopped noticing it, started to dissolve. The tension in their neck, their jaw, their forehead, all of it began to release, to let go, to remember what it felt like to be soft, to be easy, to be without pain. The traveler let out a long, shuddering breath, and with it came the release of something deeper than physical tension. It was emotional holding too, the effort of staying strong, of keeping it together, of managing and coping and handling and dealing. All of it, flowing out like water from a cracked vessel, like light escaping from a container that could no longer hold it, like everything exhausted and old and no longer needed being gently, lovingly taken away. Tears came again, but differently this time. Not tears of sadness or overwhelm, but tears of relief, of release, of gratitude so profound it had to express itself somehow, and tears were the language the body chose. The caretaker said nothing, did nothing but sit nearby, present and patient, allowing the traveler whatever they needed to feel, whatever they needed to release. The lights in the branches above seemed to pulse more brightly, more warmly, as if the tree was responding, as if it was saying, "Yes, good, let it go, I'm here, I've got you, you're safe." Time passed. How much, the traveler couldn't say. It might have been minutes or hours or some other measurement that only existed in this garden. But gradually, slowly, the tears subsided. The release completed itself, and what remained was a feeling of extraordinary lightness, of spaciousness, as if rooms inside them that had been locked and cluttered for years had suddenly been opened and aired out and filled with light. The traveler took a deep breath, and it went all the way down, all the way to the bottom of their lungs, filling them completely. They couldn't remember the last time they'd breathed that deeply, that fully, that easily. "Better?" the caretaker asked gently. "So much better," the traveler whispered. I feel like myself again, or like someone I used to be, or," they struggled for words, "like someone I always could have been if I'd had permission to rest." "Yes," the caretaker said, and their smile was radiant, full of joy for the traveler's healing. "That's exactly it. That's the gift the garden gives, not changing who you are, but removing what's been weighing you down, so you can remember your true nature. Light, peace, rest." The traveler sat beneath the heart tree for a while longer, simply being, simply breathing, simply existing in this state of relief and peace and profound rest. The lights continued their gentle dance above. The moss continued its warm embrace below. And the tree continued to stand, patient and ancient and endlessly kind, offering its gifts to anyone who needed them, asking nothing in return. Eventually the caretaker stood, their movements fluid and graceful, and extended a hand toward the traveler, not to pull them up, but offering, inviting, suggesting without pressure. "There is more to see if you feel ready," the caretaker said. "Or we can stay here as long as you like. The garden holds many gifts, but only you can know what you need when you need it." The traveler considered, checking in with themselves, feeling into what their body and heart were asking for. And they realized that while the deep rest beneath the heart tree had been profound and necessary, there was also a gentle curiosity stirring, a desire to see more, to experience more of this impossible place, to discover what other forms of peace and healing the garden might hold. "I'd like to see more," the traveler said, and they stood, finding themselves steadier than before, more grounded, more present in their own body. "Wonderful," the caretaker said. "Then let us continue. The night is still young, and the garden has many more secrets to share." The whispering pools. They left the heart tree reluctantly, but with the comfort of knowing it would always be there, always waiting, always ready to offer its gifts again whenever they were needed. The traveler looked back once and saw the tree's lights pulse gently, as if waving goodbye, as if promising, "I'll be here when you return." The path led them away from the circular clearing, winding gently downward, not steeply, but with just enough slope that the traveler could feel they were descending, moving into another level of the garden, another layer of peace. The air grew slightly cooler here, pleasant and refreshing, carrying with it a new scent, the clean, mineral smell of water, fresh and pure, mixed with something floral, something that spoke of growth and life and the patient work of nature. "We're coming to the whispering pools," the caretaker said, their voice taking on a quality of particular gentleness, as if speaking of something sacred. "This is one of the oldest parts of the garden, where water has been flowing for as long as anyone can remember. Many people find the sound of water especially soothing. It has a way of carrying thoughts away, of creating space between worries, of reminding us that everything flows, everything moves, nothing stays stuck forever." As they walked, the traveler began to hear it, the sound of water, but not rushing or crashing. This was gentler, a soft trickling, like rain on leaves, like a small stream over smooth stones, like the most peaceful sound in the world given form and voice. The path opened into a terraced garden, and the traveler stopped, breath catching once more at the beauty of it. There were pools, many of them at different levels, connected by gentle waterfalls that spilled from one to the next in a series of silver curtains. Each pool was different in size and shape. Some were large and round, perfect circles that reflected the moon and stars like mirrors. Others were smaller, more organic in shape, fitting naturally into curves of stone and earth. And some were tiny, no bigger than a wash basin, intimate and secret feeling, tucked into corners and alcoves. The water itself was extraordinary. It was clear, so clear the traveler could see all the way to the bottom of even the deepest pools, where pale stones lay in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly arranged. But more than clear, it was luminous. The water held light within itself, glowing softly, as if it had absorbed moonlight and starlight over countless nights, and was now emanating it back out into the world. The effect was dreamlike, otherworldly. The pools glowed like opals, like mother of pearl, like all the most beautiful, iridescent things in nature gathered together and made liquid, made flowing, made peaceful. Around each pool, plants grew in abundance. Ferns with fronds that seemed to be made of green lace, trailing vines covered in tiny star-shaped flowers, reeds and grasses that swayed gently in air currents the traveler couldn't feel. And everywhere moss, soft, thick, glowing in shades of emerald and jade and the palest green gold. "The water comes from deep in the earth," the caretaker explained, walking slowly along a stone path that curved around the pools, allowing them to be viewed from many angles. "It rises up through layers of crystal and mineral, through stone that has been holding peace for millennia. By the time it reaches these pools, it carries all of that with it, ancient calm, patient stillness, the wisdom of deep places." The traveler followed, drawn to the water, fascinated by the way it moved, the way it caught light, the way it sounded. The sound was remarkable. Each waterfall, each spillway between pools, created its own particular note. Some were higher, sweeter, like wind chimes or small bells. Others were deeper, richer, like the lowest notes of a cello or the resonance of a singing bowl. And all together, they created a symphony, not a complicated or demanding piece of music, but something simple and endlessly repeatable, a melody that could play forever without ever becoming tiresome. "This is the whisper," the caretaker said, "the voice of the pools. Some say the water is speaking, telling stories of all the rain that ever fell, all the snow that ever melted, all the tears that ever flowed. Others say it's singing, offering a lullaby to anyone who needs it. I think it's both. I think the water here knows how to be whatever each person needs it to be." The traveler approached the edge of the nearest pool and knelt on the moss, which cushioned their knees like the softest carpet. They looked into the water and saw their reflection again, but even softer than in the earlier pond, even more peaceful. They looked like someone dreaming, someone between worlds, someone remembering what it felt like to have nothing to do but exist. "You can touch the water," the caretaker said. "Many people find it helps. The water is cool but not cold, and it carries some of the same healing properties as the starlight, as the heart tree. It helps wash away what no longer serves you." The traveler reached out slowly and let their fingertips break the surface of the water. It was cool, yes, but in the most refreshing way, like drinking clear water on a hot day, like stepping into shade after too much sun, like relief given physical form. And there was a sensation, a tingling, gentle and pleasant, that traveled up their fingers, their hand, their arm. The water seemed to respond to the touch. Ripples spread outward in perfect circles, each one carrying its own small amount of light, so that it looked like rings of luminescence expanding across the pool's surface, like visible sound waves, like something alive and aware and welcoming. The traveler cupped their hand and brought some water to their face, splashing it gently on their skin. It felt incredible, cooling and soothing, and somehow cleansing in a way that went beyond physical dirt. It felt like washing away exhaustion, worry, the accumulated weight of too many difficult days. They splashed water on their face again, then their neck, their arms, and each time they felt lighter, clearer, more present. The water ran down in rivulets that glowed faintly, carrying away invisible burdens, invisible weights, leaving behind only ease, only peace. Some people like to sit and soak their feet, the caretaker said, gesturing to a pool that was shallow near its edge, with a smooth stone ledge that seemed designed exactly for this purpose. The water here is warmed slightly by hot springs deep below. It's very soothing for tired feet, tired bodies. The traveler didn't need further invitation. They moved to the pool the caretaker had indicated, sat on the stone ledge, and removed their shoes. They couldn't quite remember when they'd put them on, or even what they looked like, but somehow here they were, and removing them felt like shedding something unnecessary, something that belonged to the outside world but not to this place of rest. They let their feet slip into the water, and immediately felt a wave of relief, so intense it almost made them gasp. The water was the perfect temperature, warm enough to relax, cool enough to refresh. It lapped gently around their ankles, their calves, and everywhere it touched, tension dissolved. The traveler hadn't realized how much they'd been holding in their legs, in their feet. How tightly they'd been gripping the earth, as if afraid they might float away, as if constant tension was the only thing keeping them grounded. But now, feeling the water's gentle support, they understood. You don't need to hold so tightly. You don't need to grip and clench and force. You can be held instead. You can let something else do the work of keeping you safe. They closed their eyes and listened to the water's whisper, the soft trickling of the waterfalls, the gentle lap of water against stone, the underlying hum that seemed to come from the water itself, from its movement, from its patient, eternal flow. The sound created space in their mind. Thoughts that had been crowding together, overlapping, demanding attention, they began to separate, to spread out, to move at a more manageable pace. It was like watching clouds drift across a sky instead of being caught inside a storm. The thoughts were still there, but distant now, no longer pressing, no longer urgent. The traveler breathed in time with the water's rhythm, and felt their entire being begin to synchronize with this place, with this moment, with this profound and simple act of rest. The water washes more than the body, the caretaker said softly, and they had seated themselves nearby on a smooth boulder, their robes pooling around them like liquid moonlight. It washes the mind too, the heart, the spirit. Whatever needs cleansing, the water knows. You need only let it do its work. The traveler sat with their feet in the glowing water for a long time, or what felt like a long time, though time here continued to be strange, elastic, more like a feeling than a measurement. And gradually, they became aware of other aspects of the pools that they hadn't noticed at first. There were tiny fish swimming in some of the pools. Not many, just a few in each, small and silver and glowing faintly, like living stars underwater. They moved in graceful patterns, never rushed, never frantic, just gliding through the water with an ease that was beautiful to watch. The moonfish, the caretaker said, noticing where the traveler's attention had gone. They live only in these pools, only here. No one knows where they came from originally, but they've been here as long as the water has been flowing. They feed on starlight and moonbeams, impossible as that sounds. Watch them long enough, and you'll find your breathing slows to match their movements. They're very peaceful creatures. They teach patience without trying. The traveler watched the moonfish glide and turn, their small bodies catching light, reflecting it, becoming part of the pool's general luminescence. And yes, the caretaker was right. Watching them was hypnotic in the gentlest way. Mesmerizing without being demanding. Peaceful without being dull. There were plants growing in the water too, the traveler noticed. Water lilies with petals that seemed to be made of moonstone, floating serenely on the surface. Reeds that swayed beneath the water like slow dancers. And on the bottom of one pool, growing in delicate strands, was something that looked like hair made of light, waving gently in currents the traveler couldn't see, creating patterns that were endlessly beautiful, endlessly varied, endlessly soothing to observe. Every element of the garden works together, the caretaker explained. The plants oxygenate the water and keep it pure. The fish distribute nutrients and create gentle movement. The stones filter and hold temperature. The minerals add healing properties. Nothing is random here. Everything serves the purpose of peace, of rest, of healing. The traveler nodded, understanding in a way that went beyond words. This was design in its highest form. Not control, not imposition, but careful tending, thoughtful arrangement, creating conditions where natural beauty and peace could flourish. They lifted their feet from the water eventually, feeling renewed, feeling lighter, feeling as if those feet had walked through years of difficulty and were now clean, refreshed, ready to carry them forward into whatever came next. The caretaker produced from somewhere. The traveler couldn't see where, but somehow it appeared. A soft cloth that was warm and dry and smelled faintly of lavender. For drying, the caretaker said, offering it with that same gentle courtesy, that same respect for the traveler's autonomy and dignity. The traveler dried their feet, and the cloth was the softest thing they'd ever touched, warm as if it had been sitting in sunshine, though there was no sun here, only moon and stars and the garden's own luminescence. When they were done, they looked up to find the caretaker smiling at them, those kind eyes full of warmth and approval, and something else. Pride, perhaps, at seeing someone so clearly receiving the garden's gifts, so clearly allowing themselves to be helped. "You're doing beautifully," the caretaker said. "Allowing yourself to rest is not always easy. Many people resist, even here. They feel they should be doing something, accomplishing something, proving something. But you're letting yourself simply receive. That's a gift you're giving yourself." The traveler felt a warmth in their chest at these words, a recognition that yes, this was hard sometimes, and yes, they were doing it anyway, and yes, that mattered. "What's next?" they asked, and were surprised to find they were smiling, genuinely smiling, not forcing it, not performing it, but smiling because they felt peaceful, because they felt curious, because for the first time in so long, they felt present and engaged without also feeling overwhelmed. "Next," the caretaker said, standing and gesturing to a path that led away from the pools, winding upward slightly toward what looked like another grove of trees. "We visit the Lantern Walk, one of my favorite places in all the garden. A place where light and shadow dance together, where every step feels like moving through a dream, where the very air seems to hold magic." The travelers stood, finding their body easier now, more fluid, less burdened. They looked back at the whispering pools one last time, the glowing water, the gentle waterfalls, the moonfish gliding in their eternal, peaceful patterns, and felt grateful, deeply grateful, for this gift of cleansing, this gift of flow, this reminder that nothing stays stuck forever, that everything moves, that healing is possible. "I'm ready," they said to the caretaker. And together, they began to climb the gentle path toward the Lantern Walk, toward whatever new form of peace awaited them there. The Lantern Walk. The path curved upward in a gentle spiral, never steep, never demanding, just a slow, easy ascent that felt less like climbing and more like floating upward on air currents too gentle to feel but strong enough to carry. As they walked, the traveler noticed the sounds of the whispering pools gradually fading behind them, not disappearing but softening, becoming part of the background symphony of the garden, a distant melody that you could still hear if you listened for it, a reminder of where you'd been, what you'd experienced. New sounds emerged as they climbed, a soft chiming, delicate as glass, musical as wine through hollow reeds, a gentle creaking like rope swaying, like something suspended moving in barely their breezes. And underneath it all, that same sense of presence, of awareness, of the garden itself breathing, being, existing in its patient, eternal way. The trees here were different again. Taller, perhaps, or maybe it just felt that way because of the slope, the perspective. Their trunks were darker, not black but deep charcoal, deep midnight blue, colors that belonged to the hours after sunset, to that threshold between twilight and true night. Their bark had a texture that reminded the traveler of fabric, of velvet or suede, something that invited touch, that promised softness. And hanging from every branch, suspended at different heights, swaying gently in currents of air that seemed to exist only here, were lanterns. Hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. Each one different, unique, crafted with care and intention and love. Some were made of paper, rice paper thin as whispers, glowing from within with soft golden light. Others were glass, round as bubbles, clear as water, holding flames that burned without heat, without consumption, eternal and gentle. There were lanterns made of what looked like pressed flowers, petals arranged in patterns that created colored light, rose and amber, lavender and pale green. There were lanterns of hammered metal, pierced with tiny holes that let light escape in patterns, in constellations, in shapes that cast shadows like stories on the ground below. Each lantern hung from nearly invisible thread, or perhaps from spider silk, or from moonbeams themselves. It was impossible to tell. They floated at various heights, some at eye level, some higher overhead, some lower, near the ground, creating layers of light, dimensions of illumination, a three-dimensional tapestry of gentle radiance. The path wound between them, and as the travelers stepped fully onto what the caretaker had called the Lantern Walk, they understood immediately why this was one of the caretaker's favorite places. It was breathtaking, magical in the truest sense. Walking among the floating lanterns felt like moving through a dream, through a painting come to life, through some impossible realm where light itself had learned to dance. Each lantern, the caretaker said, their voice hushed with reverence, with affection, represents someone who found rest here. When a visitor leaves the garden, truly rested, truly healed, they leave behind a lantern. Not consciously, it simply appears, created by the garden itself as a kind of memory, a kind of thank you, a kind of blessing for all those who come after. The traveler looked at the lanterns with new eyes, with deeper understanding. Each one was a story. Each one was a journey to rest, to peace, to healing. Each one was proof that people had been tired before, had been weary before, had needed sanctuary before, and had found it here, and had left restored. So many, the traveler whispered, awed by the sheer number of lanterns floating above and around them. So many, the caretaker agreed gently. The world holds much weariness, much exhaustion, much need for rest. But it also holds this, proof that rest is possible, that healing happens, that no one is alone in their tiredness. Every person who has ever needed to stop, to breathe, to let go, they're represented here. And when you leave, whenever that is, your lantern will join them. Your light will help guide others who come seeking what you sought. The traveler felt tears threaten again, not sad tears, but something more complex. Gratitude, perhaps. Relief at not being alone. Joy at being part of something larger, something beautiful, something that connected them to countless others across time who had also been tired, who had also needed this. They walked slowly along the path, the caretaker beside them, and the lanterns swayed gently overhead, creating moving patterns of light and shadow that were hypnotic, soothing, endlessly fascinating to watch. Some lanterns glowed steady and constant, like faithful companions, like promises kept. Others pulsed gently, rhythmically, like breathing, like heartbeats, like the fundamental rhythms of life. Still others flickered softly, dancing, playful, creating ever-changing patterns that never repeated, but always felt harmonious, always felt right. The colors were extraordinary. While many lanterns glowed in shades of gold and amber, warm, honey-colored light that felt like comfort, like home, others offered different hues. There were lanterns of the palest pink, gentle as rose petals, as dawn light, as kindness made visible. There were blue lanterns, cool and calming like deep water, like the sky just after sunset, like the color of peace itself if peace had a color. There were green lanterns, soft as new leaves, as growing things, as hope and renewal. And some lanterns held multiple colors, changing slowly from one to another, gold fading into rose, rose bleeding into lavender, lavender shifting into the palest blue, blue cycling back to gold. These were especially mesmerizing, their gentle transitions creating a sense of flow, of change happening so gradually you barely noticed it until suddenly you realized everything was different, everything had transformed while you were watching. You can stop anywhere along the path, the caretaker said. Take as much time as you need. Look at the lanterns. Listen to their chiming. Let yourself be here, fully here, without hurry or destination. The traveler did stop several times, drawn to different lanterns for reasons they couldn't always articulate. One in particular caught their attention. A paper lantern, simple in construction, glowing warm gold, but with something written on its surface in delicate calligraphy. They stepped closer, careful not to disturb the lantern's gentle swaying, and read the words. I was so tired. Now I remember how to rest. Simple words, but they pierced the traveler's heart with their truth, their vulnerability, their hope. They moved to another lantern, this one made of frosted glass, and saw more words etched into its surface. The world asked too much. Here, nothing asks anything at all. Here, I am enough exactly as I am. Another lantern, metal this time, with holes that let light through in star patterns. I forgot what peace felt like. This garden remembered for me. The traveler realized that not all lanterns bore words, but many did. Tiny messages, quiet truths, expressions of gratitude or relief or wonder. Each one was like a prayer, like a blessing, like a letter to everyone who came after, saying, "You are not alone. I was tired too. Rest is possible. Healing is real." They read several more. "My shoulders are lighter. My heart is softer. Thank you. I can breathe again. I didn't know I'd stopped breathing." The exhaustion was so deep. This garden reached deeper. "I found myself here. I didn't know I'd been lost." Each message was a gift, a reassurance, a reminder that the tiredness they'd been carrying wasn't weakness, wasn't failure, wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was human, it was normal, it was shared by so many, and it was okay, and help was here, and rest was possible. The travelers stood among the floating lanterns, letting the light wash over them, letting the gentle chiming sounds create space in their mind, letting themselves simply be present to this beauty, this peace, this overwhelming evidence that they were part of something larger, something ancient, something that held everyone who had ever been weary and needed somewhere safe to rest. The caretaker watched them with those patient, kind eyes, giving them all the time they needed, never rushing, never pressing, just being present, being witness, being gentle guardian of this sacred space. "The lanterns respond to presence," the caretaker said softly after a while. "If you reach toward one slowly, gently, it will come closer. They like to be acknowledged. They like to know their light is seen, appreciated." The traveler reached out tentatively toward a nearby lantern, a round one, made of pale blue glass, glowing like captured moonlight. They extended their hands slowly, and yes, the lantern drifted toward them as if drawn by invisible strings, as if curious, as if pleased to have attention. It came close enough that the traveler could cup their hands beneath it, not touching, but close, creating a space between their palms where the lantern floated, suspended, glowing, sharing its light directly, intimately. The blue light filled their cupped hands, spilled between their fingers, and brought with it a sensation of coolness, of calm, of deep, oceanic peace. It felt like standing on a shore at twilight, watching waves come in, watching them go out, understanding that this rhythm had existed long before you were born and would continue long after, and finding comfort in that continuity, that endless flow. The traveler stayed like that for several breaths, receiving the lantern's light, receiving its gift, and then slowly lowered their hands, releasing it. The lantern bobbed slightly, as if nodding, as if saying goodbye or thank you or I see you, and then drifted back to its place among the others, resuming its gentle swaying, its patient glowing. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the caretaker said. "The way light can be shared without being diminished. The way one candle can light 1,000 others and lose nothing of its own flame. That's what happens here. Every person who rests in this garden adds to the light, makes it brighter for those who come after. Your rest is not just for you, it's a gift to everyone." The traveler felt the truth of this settle in their bones, in their heart. Rest wasn't selfish. Peace wasn't indulgent. Taking time to heal wasn't weakness. It was necessary. It was generous. It was the way you ensured you had light to share, strength to offer, presence to give. They walked further along the lantern walk, and the path led them to a place where several large rocks created a natural sitting area. The stones were smooth, the perfect height for sitting, and they were warm. Whether from some internal heat or from absorbing the light of thousands of lanterns, the traveler couldn't tell. "Rest here for a moment," the caretaker suggested. "Just sit. Watch the lanterns. Listen to their song. Let the light fill you." The traveler sat, and the stone was indeed warm and comfortable, supporting them perfectly. They leaned back, tilting their head up to watch the lanterns floating overhead, layers and layers of them, near and far, creating depth, creating dimension, creating a canopy of light that was one of the most beautiful things they'd ever seen. The chiming sounds became more noticeable now that they were still. Each lantern, as it swayed, created its own small sound, some like bells, some like glass touching glass, some like wind through reeds. And all together, they created a composition, a soundscape that was constantly changing but always harmonious, always peaceful, always perfect for this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. The traveler felt their eyes growing heavy, not with exhaustion this time, but with a different kind of tiredness. The satisfied tiredness of someone who has found what they were looking for. The gentle tiredness of someone who is safe, who is held, who can finally let their guard down. They didn't fight it. They let their eyes drift half-closed, still watching the lanterns through their lashes, seeing them blur and multiply, seeing the light become less defined and more feeling, more sensation than sight. The caretaker's presence nearby was steady, comforting. The traveler could hear them breathing, slow, and even could sense their patience, their care, their complete commitment to allowing the traveler whatever they needed, whatever would help. "The garden is preparing you," the caretaker said, their voice hardly more than a whisper, blending with the chiming lanterns, becoming part of the symphony. "With each place you visit, each gift you receive, you're being readied for deeper rest. Your body is relaxing. Your mind is quieting. Your heart is softening. Soon, very soon, you'll be ready for true sleep. The kind that heals. The kind that restores. The kind that makes you whole again." The traveler nodded slightly, understanding, trusting, ready. They sat among the lanterns for a while longer, time once again becoming elastic, becoming irrelevant, becoming nothing more than a series of breaths, a sequence of heartbeats, a flow of moments that didn't need counting or measuring. And when the caretaker eventually stood, extending a hand in invitation, the traveler rose too, feeling even lighter than before, even softer, even more at peace. "Come," the caretaker said. "There's more yet to see. Places even quieter, even gentler, even more deeply restful. The garden is vast, and every corner holds gifts. Shall we continue?" The traveler looked one last time at the floating lanterns, at the layers of light, at the evidence of thousands who had rested here before them, who had left their light behind as blessing, as guide, as promise. "Yes," they said softly. "I'm ready." And together, they left the lantern walk, stepping back onto a path that led deeper still into the secret garden of starlight, toward places where rest deepened into something more, where peace became profound, where the journey toward true, healing sleep continued in its gentle, inevitable way. The garden of soft shadows. The path from the lantern walk descended gently, leading them into a part of the garden where the light changed once more. Not darker exactly, but softer, more diffused, more like twilight than night. Here, the starlight seemed filtered through layers of silk, reaching the ground in whispers rather than beams, in suggestions rather than statements. This was a place of in-between things, a place where light and shadow met and mingled, where neither held dominance, but both existed in perfect balance, each making the other more beautiful by contrast. "The garden of soft shadows," the caretaker announced quietly, their voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves overhead. "Some people are afraid of shadows, of darkness, but here you'll find they can be gentle things, comforting things. Darkness is not the absence of light, it's a different kind of presence. A place to rest your eyes. A place where you don't have to be visible, where you can simply exist without being seen." The traveler understood immediately what the caretaker meant. There was a relief in stepping into this softer light, this gentler space. In the world outside the garden, there was always so much light, harsh fluorescence, glaring screens, the expectation of being visible, being seen, being present and accounted for. But here, in these soft shadows, there was permission to fade a little, to blur at the edges, to not be quite so defined or definite. The trees here grew closer together, their branches creating a loose canopy overhead that allowed starlight through but transformed it, softening it, making it dreamlike and uncertain. The path beneath their feet was still visible, still glowing faintly, but more subtly now, like a suggestion of direction rather than a command. Growing in the shadows were plants unlike any the traveler had seen elsewhere in the garden. These had leaves in shades of deep purple and indigo, charcoal and midnight blue. Some were nearly black, but not frightening, soft black, velvet black, the color of restful sleep, of closed eyes, of the space behind your eyelids when you finally let yourself drift away. Among the dark-leaved plants grew flowers that glowed very faintly, not bright like the moonbells or the luminous blooms they'd seen earlier, but with just the barest hint of light, like stars seen through heavy clouds, like fireflies at the very edge of vision. You had to look carefully to see them, had to be patient, had to let your eyes adjust. "These are called shadow roses," the caretaker explained, gesturing to a cluster of dark flowers. "They teach us that not everything worth seeing is obvious, bright, demanding attention. Some of the most beautiful things are subtle, quiet, easy to miss if you're moving too quickly or looking too hard." The traveler moved closer to examine the shadow roses. They were indeed roses, but their petals were the color of deep twilight, purple-black with the faintest inner glow, like they held tiny embers at their hearts. Their scent was different too, not the heavy sweetness of regular roses, but something more mysterious, more complex. It smelled like the air after rain, like old books, like the quiet of an empty house, like solitude given fragrance. The traveler breathed it in and felt something shift inside them, a recognition that aloneness didn't have to mean loneliness, that quiet didn't have to mean emptiness, that there was richness in subtle things, in gentle things, in things that didn't announce themselves but simply existed, patient and sure. As they walked deeper into this shadowed garden, The traveler noticed how their footsteps made even less sound here than elsewhere. The path seemed to absorb sound, to cushion it, to hold it gently so that nothing jarred, nothing disrupted the profound quiet. There were creatures here too, the traveler realized. Small ones, shy ones, creatures of dusk and darkness that meant no harm, but simply lived their lives in the gentle shadows. A moth with wings the color of smoke drifted past, nearly invisible against the darkened foliage until it caught a stray beam of filtered starlight and suddenly became visible. Beautiful, delicate, its wings traced with patterns that looked like eyes, like stars, like ancient symbols whose meanings had been forgotten but whose beauty remained. The caretaker noticed the traveler watching the moth and smiled. The shadow moths. They're born from the darkness here, from the quiet spaces between the lights. They remind us that even in darkness there is life, there is beauty, there is movement and purpose and grace. The moth landed on a nearby leaf, resting, its wings slowly opening and closing like breathing, like meditation, like the gentle pulse of being alive. Further along the path, the traveler saw what looked like a small hollow in the base of a tree, a dark opening, welcoming rather than threatening. Inside, they could just make out a pair of eyes, luminous and soft, watching them with curiosity but no fear. "A shadow rabbit," the caretaker whispered. "They live in the quiet places, the dark corners, the spaces most people overlook. They're gentle creatures and very wise. They know all about rest, about hiding when the world is too much, about finding safe spaces where you can be small and protected and unseen." The rabbit blinked slowly, its eyes like tiny moons in the darkness, and then withdrew deeper into its hollow, not out of fear but simply returning to its rest, to its privacy, to its chosen solitude. The path led them to a grove where the trees grew in a circle, their branches woven overhead to create a space that was even more sheltered, even more protected. In the center of this circle was an area carpeted with moss so thick and dark it looked like velvet, like the richest fabric ever created, and scattered across this moss were large cushions. Or perhaps they were natural growths that happened to be shaped like cushions. The traveler couldn't tell. They were covered in something that looked like dark fur or very soft suede, in colors of charcoal and deep purple and the darkest midnight blue. "This is a resting place," the caretaker said. "Many people stop here. The shadows make it easy to let go, to not feel watched or visible or on display. You can lie down here and truly disappear for a while, be held by darkness without fear." The traveler was drawn to this space, to the promise of being unseen, of melting into shadows, of letting go of the constant awareness of being a self, being a person, being someone who occupied space and had to maintain boundaries and definitions. They moved to one of the cushions and lowered themselves onto it. It was even softer than it looked, yielding immediately to their weight, molding around their body like it had been designed specifically for them, for this moment, for this need. The traveler lay back and felt the cushion embrace them, felt the shadows close gently around them like protective wings, like a loving parent's arms, like the universe itself saying, "You are safe, you are held, you can rest now, you can stop performing, stop maintaining, stop being visible." Looking up through the woven branches, they could see patches of sky, dark sky, star-scattered sky, infinite sky that somehow felt close and intimate rather than vast and overwhelming. The shadows softened everything, made the night feel like a room rather than an endlessness, made infinity feel manageable, friendly, warm. "In the world outside," the caretaker said, settling nearby on another cushion, their presence close enough for comfort but not so close as to intrude, "there is so much pressure to be bright, to shine, to be constantly visible and productive and on. But sometimes what we need most is permission to fade a little, to be dim, to rest in darkness without fear or shame." The traveler felt tears again, such a familiar sensation now, but each time different, each time releasing something new. These tears were about permission, about being allowed to not be okay, to not be strong, to not be shining and bright and always on. "You don't have to be the light all the time," the caretaker continued, their voice so gentle it was almost part of the darkness itself. "Sometimes you can be the darkness, the rest, the quiet, the space between. That's not less than light, it's equally necessary, equally valuable, equally sacred." The traveler let these words sink in, let them settle into places that had been tight with the effort of always trying to be enough, always trying to shine, always trying to be visible and valuable and worth something. Here, in the soft shadows, they didn't have to be any of those things. They could simply be, simply exist, simply rest in obscurity, in quietness, in the blessed relief of not being seen, not being required, not being anything at all except a breathing body, a beating heart, a presence held gently by darkness. Time passed. The traveler lay on the cushion, feeling their bodies sink deeper into softness, feeling the shadows hold them, feeling the profound peace that comes from being allowed to disappear for a while, to be nothing, to be nowhere, to simply exist without definition or purpose. The caretaker sat quietly nearby, a gentle presence, occasionally humming a soft tune that was barely audible, that might have been imagination, that might have been the garden itself singing through them. Eventually, and the traveler had no idea how much time had passed, whether minutes or hours, the caretaker spoke again. "There is something I'd like to show you," they said softly. "If you feel ready. A place very special, very sacred. A place where many people find the deepest rest of all." The traveler stirred, feeling their body reluctant to move, comfortable here in the shadows, in the softness, in the blessed invisibility. But there was also curiosity, trust in the caretaker's guidance, a sense that whatever came next would be exactly what they needed. "I'm ready," they said, though their voice came out quieter than they expected, as if they'd partially forgotten how to speak, as if they'd been so deep in rest that words had become unnecessary. The caretaker stood and offered a hand, not to pull but to assist, to support. The traveler took it and rose, feeling their body both heavy and light at the same time, weighted with relaxation, but also somehow floating, untethered, free. "What you'll see next," the caretaker said as they began to walk again, leaving the circle of woven trees, leaving the soft shadows, "is the heart of the garden's gift. The place where rest becomes sleep, where waking ends and dreaming begins, where everything we've done, everywhere we've been, has been preparing you to arrive." The traveler felt a flutter of something, not anxiety exactly, but anticipation, readiness, the sense of approaching something significant, something transformative. The path led them upward slightly, out of the deeper shadows, and into a space where the light changed again. Not brighter, but clearer somehow, more pure, more intentional. They were approaching something. The traveler could feel it, a presence ahead, a destination, a place that was calling them forward not with urgency, but with gentle invitation, with patient welcome, with the promise of something they'd been seeking all along without quite knowing what it was. The trees opened up, and the path widened, and ahead, the traveler could see what looked like structures, buildings perhaps, or something else, something that couldn't quite be described with ordinary words. "The pavilions of deep rest," the caretaker said, and their voice held such warmth, such affection, such reverence that the traveler knew they were about to experience something extraordinary. "Where the garden offers its greatest gift. Where true healing happens. Where sleep comes not as escape, but as restoration, as renewal, as the profound rest that makes us whole again." They walked toward the pavilions, and with each step, the traveler felt themselves being prepared, being opened, being made ready to receive whatever gift awaited them in this sacred space, this heart of the garden, this place where all their journeying had been leading since the moment they first saw the gate, since the moment they first stepped into the Secret Garden of Starlight. The night was deep now, profound, and the moon hung low and full, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as it needed to be, exactly right for this moment of approaching the deepest rest of all. The pavilions of deep rest. The pavilions emerged from the landscape like dreams taking solid form, structures that seemed to exist in that liminal space between imagination and reality, between built and grown, between architecture and nature. There were several of them, scattered across a gently rolling meadow where the grass grew soft and thick, each blade glowing with the faintest luminescence, creating a carpet of silver green that seemed to breathe with the night, that seemed to welcome each footstep with quiet gratitude. Each pavilion was different, unique, designed with some particular purpose or personality in mind. Some were round, dome-shaped, their walls made of what looked like woven starlight and spider silk, translucent and shimmering. Others were more angular, with graceful peaked roofs, their posts carved from pale wood that glowed softly from within. Still others were open on all sides, just roofs supported by delicate columns, creating sheltered spaces that still allowed the night air to flow freely through. The structures were draped with fabrics that moved in breezes the traveler couldn't quite feel, silks and gauzes in colors of cream and silver, pale blue and the softest lavender, all of them catching light in ways that made them seem liquid, alive, responsive to some rhythm beyond ordinary perception. Each pavilion offers a different kind of rest, the caretaker explained as they walked slowly across the glowing meadow, their path winding between the structures. Some people need complete enclosure, to feel cocooned and protected. Others need openness, to feel connected to the sky, to the stars. Some need softness everywhere. Others need support, structure, something firm to rest against. The garden knows. It always knows. As they walked, the traveler could see into some of the pavilions. In one, there was a bed, if such a simple word could describe it, piled high with cushions and blankets that looked softer than clouds, warmer than summer air, more inviting than anything the traveler had ever seen. The bed seemed to float slightly, suspended on nothing visible, swaying ever so gently, like a boat on the calmest water, like a cradle in the gentlest hands. In another pavilion, there was no bed but instead a hammock woven from something that looked like moonbeams, strung between two posts, draped with throws and pillows, creating a nest, a cocoon, a place to be held suspended between earth and sky. A third pavilion held what looked like a large cushioned platform at ground level, surrounded by walls of flowing water, thin sheets of liquid light that fell in silence, creating an enclosure of movement and shimmer, offering both privacy and the soothing presence of water's endless flow. Each one was beautiful. Each one was inviting. Each one called to different needs, different preferences, different ways of surrendering to rest. "This is where visitors come when they're ready for true sleep," the caretaker said, stopping in the center of the meadow, turning slowly to indicate all the pavilions around them. "Everything you've experienced tonight, the starlight trees, the heart tree, the whispering pools, the lantern walk, the garden of soft shadows, all of it has been preparing your body, your mind, your spirit for this, for the deep rest that heals, for the sleep that restores." The traveler felt the truth of this in their bones. They were tired now, but not with the exhausted, wired tension they'd arrived with. This was different, a clean tiredness, a satisfied weariness, the feeling of having walked a good distance and being ready now to rest, to stop, to lay down the journey and simply be still. "Would you like to choose a pavilion?" the caretaker asked. "Or shall I guide you to one that I think might suit you?" The traveler considered, looking around at the options, feeling into what they needed, what called to them. And their eyes kept returning to one pavilion in particular. It stood slightly apart from the others, nestled beside a grove of those starlight trees they'd seen earlier, their branches creating a natural canopy overhead. The pavilion itself was round, its walls made of something like woven light, creating a sense of enclosure while still allowing the night's beauty to filter through. Inside, the traveler could see a bed, low to the ground, wide and welcoming, covered in layers of blankets and pillows that looked impossibly soft, impossibly inviting. "That one," the traveler said, pointing. "May I?" "Of course," the caretaker said, and their smile was radiant with approval, with pleasure at seeing someone trust their own knowing, their own instincts about what they needed. "An excellent choice. Come." They walked together toward the pavilion, and as they drew closer, the traveler could see more details. Small lanterns hung at intervals around the structure's perimeter, not the floating lanterns from the lantern walk, but smaller, simpler ones, glowing with soft amber light. Between the lanterns, wind chimes hung, delicate things made of glass and crystal that rang so quietly they were more vibration than sound, more feeling than hearing. The entrance to the pavilion was draped with gauzy curtains that shifted and swayed, parting easily as the caretaker brushed them aside, holding them open for the traveler to enter. The traveler stepped through and immediately felt something shift, a sense of crossing another threshold, entering another kind of space, somewhere even more sacred, even more set apart than the rest of the garden. Inside, the air was slightly warmer, though not hot, just perfectly comfortable, as if the temperature itself had been designed exactly for their body, exactly for this moment. The floor was covered with thick rugs and soft colors, layers of them creating depth, creating cushioning for each step. And the bed. The traveler moved toward it slowly, reverently, hardly believing something could look so inviting, so perfect, so exactly what they needed. It was wide enough for them to spread out completely, or to curl up small if they wanted. The base appeared to be made of something that looked like woven branches, but smooth and soft rather than rough, and it sat low to the ground, creating a sense of being held by the earth, of being supported from below by something solid and ancient and trustworthy. The mattress, though that word seemed inadequate, was thick and yielding, covered in sheets that looked like they'd been woven from silk and starlight, cool to the touch but promising warmth once you were underneath. And the blankets. There were several layers, each one different, allowing the traveler to choose exactly how much weight, how much warmth, how much covering they needed. The pillows were numerous and varied, some firm for support, some soft for sinking into, some small for tucking under knees or arms, some large for cradling head and shoulders. They were covered in fabric so soft it barely registered as fabric at all, more like touching air, like touching comfort itself. "This bed," the caretaker said softly, "has held thousands who needed rest. It knows what bodies need. It knows how to cradle without constraint, how to support without rigidity, how to provide exactly the right amount of softness, the right amount of firmness, the right amount of gentle, loving support." The traveler reached out and touched the bed, running their hand over the sheets, the blankets, a pillow. Everything was exactly as promised, soft beyond imagining, inviting beyond words, designed entirely and completely for rest, for comfort, for the profound letting go that true sleep requires. "Would you like to lie down?" the caretaker asked. "You can rest here as long as you need. Time doesn't work the same way in the pavilions. You could sleep for what feels like hours and have only moments pass outside, or you could sleep for moments and wake truly rested. The garden provides what you need, always." The traveler felt a surge of longing so strong it was almost painful. To lie down, to let this bed hold them, to surrender finally and completely to rest. But there was also a small hesitation, a last thread of the outside world still pulling at them, still whispering that there were things to do, places to be, responsibilities waiting. The caretaker seemed to sense this struggle, this final resistance, and moved closer, their presence warm and reassuring. "Everything else can wait," they said gently but firmly. "Everything. Whatever is waiting for you outside these gates, it will still be there when you're ready. But right now, in this moment, the only thing that matters is rest. The only thing that matters is you, allowing yourself to be held, to be cared for, to receive the gift that this garden, this night, this moment is offering you." The traveler felt something inside them finally, truly let go. That last thread of resistance dissolved like morning mist, like frost under sun, like everything that was never real to begin with, only habit, only fear, only the accumulated weight of believing that rest was something you had to earn rather than something you deserved simply by existing. "I'm ready," the traveler whispered, and meant it completely, meant it in every cell of their being. "Good," the caretaker said, and helped them ease onto the bed, not physically lifting or carrying, but simply being present, offering support, making the transition from standing to lying down feel natural, easy, right? The traveler settled onto the mattress and felt it respond immediately to their body, contouring around them, supporting their spine, cushioning their shoulders and hips, creating perfect alignment without any effort on their part. It was like being held in loving arms, like floating on the gentlest water, like everything they'd ever imagined comfort to be, multiplied by infinity and offered without condition. The caretaker helped arrange the blankets, pulling them up gently, tucking them loosely so the traveler felt covered, protected but not confined. The weight of the blankets was perfect, enough to provide comfort, that sense of being held that weight provides, but not so much as to feel heavy or restrictive. A pillow was adjusted under their head, the perfect height, the perfect softness. Another pillow was offered for between their knees if they wanted to lie on their side, or under their lower back if they preferred to lie flat. Every detail was attended to with care, with expertise, with the kind of loving attention that makes you feel truly seen, truly valued, truly worth caring for. "How does that feel?" the caretaker asked, stepping back slightly to give the traveler space to let them settle. "Perfect," the traveler breathed, and it was true. Everything was perfect. The bed, the blankets, the pillows, the warmth, the gentle ambient glow from the lanterns outside, the soft sound of wind chimes, the sense of being held by something larger and kinder and more patient than anything in the ordinary world. The traveler's body began to relax in ways they hadn't known were possible. Muscles they'd been holding tight for years, for decades perhaps, started to release. Their jaw unclenched completely. Their shoulders dropped away from their ears. Their hands, which had been unconsciously fisted, opened into soft curves. Their legs stopped bracing, stopped being ready to run or fight or hold ground. Everything softened. Everything let go. The caretaker watched this transformation with visible pleasure, with satisfaction at seeing someone finally, truly allow themselves to rest. "Before you drift off," they said gently, "there is one more gift the garden would like to offer you. A small ritual, something to carry you even deeper into rest, into healing sleep. Would you like that?" The traveler nodded, too comfortable now to speak much, already feeling the pull of sleep beginning to tug at the edges of their consciousness, but still present enough to receive one more blessing, one more gift. "Wait here," the caretaker said. "I'll return in just a moment." They slipped through the curtains, leaving the traveler alone in the pavilion, cocooned in softness, surrounded by gentle light, held by the most comfortable bed they'd ever experienced. The traveler lay there, breathing slowly, feeling their bodies sink even deeper into the mattress, feeling the boundaries between themselves and the bed beginning to blur, as if they were melting into comfort, as if they were becoming one with rest itself. Through the woven walls of the pavilion, they could see the starlight trees swaying gently, could see their branches releasing those particles of luminescence that drifted down like the softest snow, like blessings falling from above, like the universe itself saying, "Sleep now, rest now, let go now, you are safe, you are held, you are loved." And the traveler believed it. For the first time in so long, they believed it completely. The ritual of starlight tea. The caretaker returned moments later, moving with that same quiet grace, carrying something on a small tray that seemed to be made of woven silver, or perhaps moonlight given solid form. As they entered, the traveler could see what rested on the tray, a delicate cup, steam rising from it in gentle spirals, and beside it, a small dish holding something that glowed very faintly in the low light. "The starlight tea," the caretaker said softly, settling beside the bed on a low cushion, placing the tray on a small table that the traveler hadn't noticed before, or perhaps it had simply appeared, materialized from the garden's generous magic. One of the oldest traditions of this garden, a blend created specifically to ease the transition from waking to sleeping, to quiet the last whispers of the mind, to invite dreams that heal rather than disturb. The traveler shifted slightly, propping themselves up on the pillows just enough to see clearly. The cup was beautiful, delicate porcelain or perhaps something finer, translucent enough that the liquid inside glowed through it, casting soft light onto the caretaker's hands. The tea itself was unlike any the traveler had ever seen. It was pale, luminous, shifting colors subtly, now silver, now the palest blue, now touched with gold, as if it couldn't decide what it was or perhaps was all colors at once, all possibilities held in suspension. "What's in it?" the traveler asked, their voice drowsy, curious but not concerned. Everything in this garden had been safe, had been healing. They trusted this too. "Flowers gathered under the full moon," the caretaker said, lifting the cup carefully. "Petals from the moon bells, essence of shadow rose, water from the whispering pools. A touch of honey made by bees that feed only on starlight. And one more ingredient, the most important." "What's that?" the traveler murmured. "Intention," the caretaker said simply. "Every cup of starlight tea is made with a specific intention, for this person, for this moment, for exactly what they need. This cup was made for you, for your rest, for your healing, for your deep, restorative, peaceful sleep." The traveler felt tears prick their eyes again at this, at the care, at the attention, at the idea that something had been created specifically for them, for their well-being, for their rest. "May I?" the caretaker asked, holding the cup near enough for the traveler to smell it. The scent was extraordinary, floral but not sweet, calming but not medicinal, complex but not overwhelming. It smelled like peace, if peace had a fragrance, like the best night's sleep you ever had, like every lullaby ever sung, distilled into aroma. "Yes," the traveler whispered. The caretaker helped them sit up a bit more, adjusting pillows behind them with practiced care, making sure they were comfortable, supported, able to drink without strain. Then they handed the traveler the cup, and the porcelain was warm in their hands, pleasantly so, like holding living comfort. The traveler raised the cup to their lips and took a small sip. The tea was perfect, not too hot, not too cool, just exactly right. The flavor was subtle, complex, impossible to describe in ordinary terms. It tasted the way moonlight looks. It tasted like starlight felt when it had landed on their palm earlier, dissolving into peace. It tasted like comfort and safety, and the moment just before sleep when everything finally lets go. As the traveler swallowed, they felt warmth spread through them. Not the warmth of temperature exactly, but a deeper warmth, an inner warmth, like every cell in their body was being touched by gentleness, by care, by healing. "Slowly," the caretaker encouraged. "Small sips. Let it work." The traveler drank slowly, savoring each sip, feeling each one carry them deeper into relaxation, deeper into readiness for sleep. Their eyelids grew heavier. Their thoughts grew quieter. The last fragments of worry, of planning, of the outside world, all of it dissolving like sugar in water, like mist in morning sun, like everything insubstantial finally revealed to be exactly that. Not real, not solid, not worth holding on to. By the time the cup was empty, the traveler felt as if they were made of silk and soft light, as if their body had become something gossamer, something that could dissolve into sleep at any moment, and it would feel not like ending, but like the most natural transition in the world. The caretaker took the cup gently and set it aside, then reached for the small dish on the tray. In it were what looked like seeds, or perhaps small crystals, each one glowing very faintly with inner light. "These are dream seeds," the caretaker explained, "from the garden's oldest tree. If you hold one in your palm as you sleep, it will guide your dreams toward peace, toward rest, toward whatever your deepest self most needs to heal. Would you like one?" The traveler nodded, unable to speak now, too drowsy, too peaceful, too far into the softening that precedes sleep. The caretaker selected one seed carefully, as if choosing specifically, as if each seed held different properties, and this particular one, was exactly right for the traveler. They placed it gently in the traveler's palm, and the seed was warm, slightly rough, like a small stone worn smooth by water, and it pulsed with the faintest rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a tiny star fallen to earth and still remembering its cosmic origins. "Hold it loosely," the caretaker said. "Don't grip. Just let it rest in your hand. Let it know you. Let it learn what you need." The traveler's fingers curled very gently around the seed, holding it the way you might hold something precious and fragile, with care but without force, with attention but without tension. The caretaker helped them lie back down fully now, settling them into the perfect position, on their side, one pillow supporting their head, another between their knees, a soft blanket pulled up to their shoulders, covering without confining, protecting without imprisoning. "There," the caretaker said softly. "Perfect. You're perfect. Everything is exactly as it should be." The traveler felt the truth of this in every part of their being. They were exactly where they needed to be. Exactly when they needed to be there. Everything that had led them to this moment, every difficult day, every exhausting week, every struggle that had driven them to the edge of their capacity, all of it had been the path to this. To this bed, to this garden, to this moment of finally being allowed to rest. "I'm going to stay here with you for a while," the caretaker said, settling more comfortably on their cushion beside the bed. "I'll keep watch. Not because there's any danger, there's no danger here, only peace, but because sometimes it helps to know someone is near, someone who cares, someone who will make sure you're safe while you let go completely." The traveler felt a swell of gratitude, so profound it was almost painful. To be cared for like this, to be watched over, to be allowed to be vulnerable, to be deeply, completely vulnerable, and know that someone kind was keeping vigil, was holding space, was ensuring their safety while they surrendered to sleep. "Thank you," they whispered, the words barely audible, hardly more than breath. "Sleep now," the caretaker said, and their voice had changed subtly, becoming even softer, even more rhythmic, taking on a quality that was almost song, almost prayer, almost spell. "Let yourself drift. Let yourself fall. The garden has you. The bed has you. I have you. Nothing can harm you here. Nothing is required of you. You need only rest. Only sleep. Only let yourself be carried into dreams." The traveler's eyes closed, not because they decided to close them, but because they could no longer stay open, because sleep was pulling them down with gentle but irresistible force, like gravity, like tide, like everything natural and right. "Your body is heavy and relaxed," the caretaker continued, their voice becoming the entire world, becoming the only sound that mattered, becoming lullaby and blessing and bridge between waking and sleeping. "Your muscles are soft. Your breathing is slow and easy. Each breath takes you deeper. Each exhale releases more. More tension. More holding. More effort. Everything you've been carrying, let it go now. Let it all go." The traveler felt themselves sinking, melting, dissolving into the most profound relaxation they'd ever experienced. The seed in their palm pulsed gently, warmly, and they could swear they felt something flowing from it, images perhaps, or feelings, or the beginning whispers of dreams waiting to unfold. "The garden will hold you while you sleep," the caretaker murmured. "The trees will watch over you. The stars will keep their vigil. And when you wake, whenever that is, whether moments from now or hours or years in dream time, you will wake restored, healed, whole, ready for whatever comes next, but only when you're truly ready. Until then, there is only this. Only sleep. Only peace. Only rest." The traveler tried to respond, to say something, to express the overwhelming gratitude and peace and relief they felt, but words wouldn't come anymore. They had moved beyond words, beyond language, beyond anything except pure sensation, pure being, pure surrender to rest. Their breathing slowed even further, falling into a deep, rhythmic pattern, in and out, like waves on a shore, like the eternal breath of the ocean, like the universe itself breathing through them. The dream seed pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat, and the traveler became aware of colors beginning to bloom behind their closed eyelids. Soft colors, gentle colors, colors that didn't demand attention but simply existed, like the beginning of dreams, like the doorway opening between one world and another. "Safe," the caretaker whispered. "You are safe. You are held. You are loved. Sleep now. Deep, deep sleep. Healing sleep. The sleep your body, your mind, your spirit has been craving. The sleep that makes you whole." And the traveler, held by the softest bed, covered by the gentlest blankets, watched over by the kindest presence, with the garden's magic flowing through them and dreams waiting to receive them, finally let go completely. They fell into sleep like falling into the warmest embrace, like sinking into the deepest comfort, like coming home after the longest journey. And the caretaker sat beside them, smiling gently, keeping watch, keeping vigil, being witness to this sacred act of surrender, this holy moment of rest, this profound gift of sleep that heals, that restores, that makes whole. Outside the pavilion, the garden continued its ancient work, the starlight trees releasing their luminous particles, the whispering pools singing their eternal songs, the lanterns glowing their patient light, the heart tree standing in its massive stillness, all of it working together to hold this sleeping soul, to protect this moment of rest, to ensure that healing happened in the deep places where only dreams can reach. The night deepened. The stars wheeled overhead in their slow dance. The moon sailed across the sky like a silver boat on dark waters. And the traveler slept, truly slept, for the first time in longer than they could remember. Slept, the dreams that heal. In the deep, peaceful darkness of sleep, the traveler began to dream. These were not the anxious dreams that had plagued them for so long, the ones where they ran but couldn't move, where they had tasks but couldn't complete them, where they were late or lost or searching for something they could never quite find. No, these dreams were different. These dreams were soft. The dream seed pulsed gently in their loosely curled hand, and from it, images began to unfold. Not chaotic or frightening, but gentle, meaningful, designed by some wisdom deeper than conscious thought to bring exactly what the traveler's weary soul needed most. The first dream was of water. The traveler found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, calm ocean. The water was the color of twilight, deep blue fading into purple, touched with silver where the moonlight fell. The waves came in so slowly they barely seemed to move, just the gentlest rise and fall, like breathing, like the earth itself inhaling and exhaling in the most patient rhythm imaginable. The traveler stepped into the water and found it was exactly the right temperature, warm enough to comfort, cool enough to refresh. It lapped around their ankles, their knees, their waist, and they felt no fear, no need to resist. They simply walked deeper, trusting, knowing somehow that this water would hold them, would support them, would never let them sink. When the water reached their chest, they leaned back and found themselves floating, effortlessly, perfectly, held up by something invisible and infinitely kind. The sky above was full of stars, more stars than they'd ever seen, arranged in patterns that almost made sense, that almost told stories they could understand if they just looked long enough. They floated like this for an eternity that felt like moments, and the water washed over them, through them, carrying away everything that hurt, everything that felt too heavy, everything that had accumulated over years of trying too hard, holding too tight, never quite letting go. The water whispered to them, though whether it was sound or feeling was impossible to tell. You don't have to hold yourself up. You don't have to work so hard. You can trust. You can rest. You are held, always supported, even when you can't feel it, even when you forget. And the traveler absorbed this message into their dreaming body, into their sleeping mind, into the deepest parts of themselves where real change happens, where true healing takes root. Gradually, the ocean dream faded, dissolving like watercolors running together, like one scene in a play giving way to another. The second dream was of a garden, not the secret garden of starlight, though perhaps it was a memory of it, or perhaps all gardens and dreams are connected, all growing from the same root. In this dream, the traveler was planting seeds, not with urgency or pressure, but slowly, carefully, with attention and care. They would dig a small hole in soft earth, place a seed inside, cover it gently, and move to the next spot. Again and again, planting, covering, moving on. Each seed they planted was something they were releasing, a worry, a regret, a resentment, a hurt. Each one went into the earth, and the earth received it without judgment, without complaint, simply accepting, simply holding, simply beginning the slow work of transformation that turns what we bury into something that can grow into beauty. The traveler planted seed after seed, and with each one they felt lighter. Each small burial was a release, a letting go, a handing over of something they'd been carrying that they didn't need to carry anymore. The earth knows how to transform pain, a voice said. Perhaps the garden itself, perhaps their own deepest wisdom rising up in dream language. You don't have to carry it forever. You can give it to something larger, something patient, something that knows how to take what hurts and turn it slowly into growth, into green things, into new life. When the last seed was planted, the traveler stood and looked around at the garden they'd created. And even as they watched, tiny green shoots began to emerge, not from the seeds they'd just planted, but from other places, from seeds planted long ago, from things released in the past that were finally ready to grow into something beautiful. Flowers bloomed, not all at once, but gradually, naturally, in their own perfect time. And each flower was a small joy, a small peace, a small triumph of healing. The garden they had created simply by letting go, simply by trusting the earth to do its transformative work. The dream shifted again, colors swirling and reforming. The third dream was of flying, but not the anxious flying where you struggle to stay airborne, where you might fall at any moment. This was effortless flight, like being carried on wind that knew exactly where you needed to go. The traveler rose into the air, and below them, the world spread out in patterns of light and shadow, in textures of forest and field and water. They could see everything from this height, but nothing felt overwhelming. There was no need to control, to direct, to manage. The wind carried them with perfect confidence, with perfect knowledge of their path. They flew over mountains that glowed softly in moonlight, over valleys filled with mist like silk scarves laid across the land. They flew over forests where trees stood in patient circles, holding space, holding wisdom, holding peace. They flew over the secret garden itself and saw it whole, all its parts connected, all its paths leading to rest, all its magic working in harmony to help weary souls find healing. From this height, their problems seemed smaller, not because they didn't matter, but because they were in perspective now. They were part of a larger pattern, a bigger picture. And the traveler understood, in that deep way that dreams teach us, that they didn't have to solve everything, fix everything, control everything. Some things would resolve themselves. Some things would change without their intervention. Some things would simply be what they were, and that was okay. You are allowed to trust, the wind whispered as it carried them. You are allowed to believe that things will work out. You are allowed to rest in uncertainty, to not know, to let tomorrow worry about tomorrow while you rest today. The flying dream continued, peaceful and sure, the traveler soaring on currents of air that felt like grace, like support they hadn't earned but was given anyway, like love that existed before they did anything to deserve it, and would continue long after they stopped trying to prove their worth. Time in dreams is strange, elastic. The traveler might have dreamed these 3 dreams in moments or hours. But whether fast or slow, each dream was doing its work, untangling knots in the psyche, releasing tensions held in muscle memory, rewiring patterns that no longer served, creating space for new ways of being, new ways of trusting, new ways of rest. The caretaker, keeping vigil beside the sleeping form, could see some of this, not the dreams themselves, but their effects. The traveler's face, which had been tight with fatigue when they arrived, had grown soft, peaceful years younger. The lines of worry between their brows had smoothed. Their jaw was slack, totally relaxed. Their breathing was so deep, so rhythmic, so perfectly at ease that it seemed to sync with the heartbeat of the garden itself, as if the sleeper and the sanctuary had become one thing, breathing together, resting together, healing together. The dream seed in the traveler's hand pulsed steadily, continuing its gentle work, continuing to guide the dreams toward exactly what was needed, exactly what would help, exactly what would heal. More dreams came, softer now, less defined. Dreams of being held, dreams of laughter, dreams of walking through fields of flowers that smelled like childhood and safety, and summer afternoons that lasted forever. Dreams of being forgiven, dreams of forgiving, dreams of release, of peace, of the sweet, simple joy of being alive without having to justify that life, without having to earn the right to exist, to rest, to be held by love that asks nothing in return. The traveler turned slightly in their sleep, settling into an even more comfortable position, and the bed adjusted with them, the mattress conforming, the pillows shifting, everything working together to maintain perfect support, perfect comfort. A small smile appeared on the traveler's sleeping face, barely there, just a tiny curve of lips, but unmistakable. They were happy. In their dreams, they were at peace. In their deep rest, they were finding what they'd been seeking. Not answers exactly, not solutions, but something more fundamental. They were finding permission. Permission to be tired. Permission to rest. Permission to be human, fallible, imperfect, and still worthy of care, still deserving of gentleness, still held by love that didn't require them to be anything other than exactly what they were. Outside the pavilion, dawn was still hours away. The night held steady, patient, in no hurry to end. The moon had moved across the sky but still shone bright and full, still offered its gentle light to the sleeping world below. The stars continued their slow wheel overhead, those ancient lights that had witnessed countless sleepers, countless dreamers, countless souls finding rest in dark hours. They had seen empires rise and fall, had watched mountains form and erode, had been witness to every human story ever lived. And still they shone, constant and kind, offering their light without judgment, without demand, simply being what they were, distant suns, impossibly far away, and yet somehow close enough to matter, close enough to comfort, close enough to remind anyone who looked up that they were part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. The caretaker continued their vigil, never moving far from the sleeping traveler, occasionally adjusting a blanket that had shifted, once brushing a strand of hair gently from the traveler's face with a touch so light it didn't disturb their sleep, only deepened it, only added to the sense of being cared for, being watched over, being safe. The garden breathed around them. The starlight trees released their gentle particles. The whispering pools sang their eternal song. The heart tree stood in its massive patience. The lantern walk glowed with the lights of thousands who had rested before. Every element of the garden continuing its work, continuing its purpose, continuing to create the conditions for healing, for peace, for the deep rest that makes transformation possible. And in the pavilion, held by the softest bed, covered by the gentlest blankets, watched over by the kindest presence, guided by dreams that knew exactly what was needed, the traveler slept on. Slept deeply, slept peacefully, slept the sleep that heals wounds we didn't know we had, slept the sleep that restores parts of ourselves we'd forgotten existed, slept the sleep that every weary soul deserves and so few ever find. Slept, and in that sleep, slowly, gently, imperceptibly but profoundly, they were healing. They were restoring. They were becoming whole again. Not fixed, because they had never been broken, but remembered, returned to themselves, brought back to the version of themselves that existed before the world taught them they had to be so much more than they were, before exhaustion became their constant companion, before rest became something they had to earn rather than something they deserved simply by being alive. The night deepened around them, holding them, keeping them, protecting their rest as if it were the most precious thing in all the world. Because it was. It truly was. The deepest peace. Time continued its strange, elastic flow in the secret garden of starlight. Hours might have passed, or merely moments. In this place, such measurements had no meaning, no urgency, no claim on the present. There was only the endless now, the eternal present where rest lived and healing happened. The traveler slept on, and their sleep grew even deeper, even more profound, reaching layers of rest that most people never touch, depths of restoration that the modern world rarely permits. This was the sleep beneath sleep, the rest beneath rest, the place where consciousness barely exists, where the self dissolves almost completely, where you are no longer quite yourself but rather a small piece of something vastly larger, part of the earth, part of the night, part of the great mystery of existence itself. In this deepest sleep, there were no more formed dreams, no more narratives or images. There was only sensation, only being, only the most fundamental experience of peace. The traveler felt, though felt is perhaps not the right word, as feeling implies a self who feels, and they had moved beyond that now. They experienced something like floating in vast darkness. Not frightening darkness, not empty darkness, but darkness that was full, pregnant with possibility, rich with potential. The darkness before creation. The darkness of the womb. The darkness that holds all light within it, waiting. In this space, there was no effort, no striving, no becoming, only being, only existing, only resting in the most complete, most absolute sense of that word. The boundaries between the traveler and everything else had dissolved. They were the bed that held them. They were the blankets that covered them. They were the air they breathed. They were the garden that surrounded them. They were the moon and stars overhead. They were everything and nothing, particular and universal, individual and infinite. This was the gift of the deepest rest, the temporary dissolution of the separate self, the small easing of the burden of being an individual, alone, responsible, apart. In this deep sleep, the traveler was allowed to remember their connection to everything, their belonging to the great web of being, their place in the vast pattern that holds all things. The caretaker, still keeping watch, could sense this depth, this profundity. They sat very still, barely breathing, honoring this sacred state, this holy condition. They knew that such deep rest was rare, precious, needed. They would guard it fiercely, would protect it absolutely, would ensure nothing disturbed this healing that happened in depths beyond conscious knowing. The pavilion itself seemed to respond to the depth of the traveler's sleep. The walls glowed slightly brighter, as if offering more protection, more shelter. The air grew even warmer, even more perfectly comfortable. The sounds from outside, the distant trickling of water, the soft chiming of wine through the garden, grew even quieter, even more distant, creating a bubble of silence, a cocoon of peace around the sleeping form. Time passed. The moon moved slowly across the sky, patient in its arc, unhurried in its journey. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The garden breathed its slow, eternal breath. And gradually, so gradually it was impossible to say when it began, the traveler started to rise up out of that deepest place. Not waking, no, not yet, but ascending slowly through layers of sleep, moving from that vast, undifferentiated peace into slightly more defined states of rest. Dreams began to form again, but these were different from the earlier ones. These were gentler, softer, more like memories than stories, more like feelings than images. The traveler dreamed of hands, gentle hands tucking them into bed as a child, hands that smelled of soap and kindness, hands that smoothed blankets and brushed hair from foreheads and made the world feel safe, made night feel like a friend rather than something to fear. They dreamed of voices, soft voices singing lullabies in languages they didn't know but somehow understood, voices that promised everything would be all right, that morning would come, that they were loved, that they were safe, that they could rest without fear, without worry, without anything except peace. They dreamed of light, not bright light, but the gentlest illumination. The glow of a nightlight in a childhood room. The soft amber of a lamp in a hallway, left on so you wouldn't be alone in the dark. The dim starlight through curtains, reminding you that the universe was vast but you were held within it, small but significant, alone but never abandoned. These dreams were healing in a different way than the earlier ones. Where those had been about release, about letting go, about transformation, these were about comfort, about being held, about remembering that you had always been held, even when you couldn't feel it, even when you forgot, even when the world seemed cold and indifferent and you felt entirely alone. The traveler sighed in their sleep, a deep, satisfied sound, like someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally set it down. The tension that had been in their body when they first entered the garden, tension they hadn't even known they were carrying, it had been there so long, was gone now. Completely gone. Released into the earth, into the air, into the vast holding space of the garden itself. Their breathing remained deep and even, but it had changed slightly. No longer the profound, barely their breathing of the deepest sleep, but something a bit more present, a bit more conscious. They were beginning the slow journey back toward wakefulness, though that destination was still far away, still hours perhaps in the elastic time of the garden. The caretaker noticed this shift and smiled. They recognized the signs of someone who had received what they needed, who had drunk deeply from the well of rest, who had been filled up with peace and was beginning to naturally, gently return to themselves. But there was no rush. No need to hurry the process. The traveler would wake when they were ready, when their body and mind and spirit had taken everything they needed from this deep restoration. Until then, the caretaker would continue their vigil, would continue their gentle guardianship, would ensure this precious sleep remained undisturbed. The dream seed in the traveler's palm had stopped pulsing. Its work was complete. It had guided the dreams it needed to guide, had offered the healing it was meant to offer. Now it was simply resting, warm and quiet in the loose curl of the traveler's fingers, waiting to return to the earth when the time was right, to be planted again, to grow into another dream-bearing tree, to continue the cycle of offering rest to weary souls. Outside the pavilion, the night was beginning to change, not ending but shifting. The darkness was still deep, the stars still bright, but there was a quality to the air that suggested dawn was thinking about arriving, though it was still hours away. The garden knew. The garden always knew. It was preparing, slowly and gently, for the transition that would eventually come, for the moment when the traveler would wake and begin their journey back to the world beyond the gate. But that moment was not yet. Not nearly yet. There was still time for more rest, more healing, more of the profound peace that this garden offered to all who found their way here, to all who needed sanctuary, to all who were brave enough to admit they were tired and needed somewhere safe to stop. The traveler turned slightly in their sleep, and the bed moved with them, supporting, adjusting, maintaining perfect comfort. A small sound escaped their lips, not quite a word, not quite a sigh, but something in between. A sound of contentment, a sound of peace, a sound of someone who has found what they were looking for and can finally rest completely. The caretaker reached out and adjusted the blanket slightly, ensuring the traveler remained covered, remained warm, remained held. Their touch was feather-light, barely there, but full of care, full of love, full of the deepest respect for this vulnerable, trusting soul who had allowed themselves to be so completely at rest. "Sleep on," the caretaker whispered, so quietly the words were more thought than sound. "Sleep and heal. Sleep and restore. There is no rush. There is nowhere else you need to be. This moment is yours. This peace is yours. This rest is yours. Take it all. Take everything you need. The garden has infinite gifts to offer, infinite peace to share, infinite love to give. Rest in it. Rest in us. Rest in the great arms of existence itself, which holds you always, which has held you since before you were born and will hold you long after, which knows your weariness and honors it, which sees your need and answers it, which loves you not for what you do but for what you are, a living being, worthy of rest, deserving of peace, held always in grace." The words hung in the air like a benediction, like a blessing, like a prayer offered not to any distant deity, but to the sacred reality of rest itself, to the holy act of surrender, to the profound courage it takes to stop, to be still, to let yourself be held. The traveler slept on, held by these words, held by the bed, held by the garden, held by the infinite patience of the universe that had brought them here, that had opened the gate, that had offered sanctuary and knew, had always known, that they would accept it, that they would walk through, that they would allow themselves the gift of rest. And in their deep sleep, in their profound peace, in their complete and utter rest, the healing continued its invisible work, knitting together what had been torn, soothing what had been inflamed, filling what had been empty, restoring what had been depleted. Cell by cell, breath by breath, moment by moment, the work of restoration, the work of healing, the work of love. The night held them, the garden held them, the caretaker held them, and they slept, they slept, they slept. The gentle awakening. In the softest, most gradual way imaginable, the traveler began to wake. Not suddenly, not with alarm or disorientation, not with the jarring shock of an intrusive sound or the harsh demand of responsibility calling. No, this awakening was as gentle as the sleep had been deep, as peaceful as the rest had been profound. It began with the smallest awareness, a sense of existing, of being present, of having a body that was warm and comfortable and extraordinarily relaxed. The traveler didn't open their eyes yet. They simply rested in that liminal space between sleeping and waking, that threshold place where dreams still linger at the edges of consciousness, where you're not quite sure what's real and what was imagined, and it doesn't matter because everything feels soft and safe and good. They became aware of breathing, their own breath, slow and deep and easy, moving in and out without effort, without thought, just the natural rhythm of a body at perfect peace. They became aware of the bed beneath them, still impossibly soft, still perfectly supportive, still holding them with that same gentle certainty it had offered when they first lay down. How long ago had that been? They had no idea. It could have been hours or days or years. Time in the garden was different, malleable, serving rest rather than demanding productivity. They became aware of warmth, the perfect temperature of the blankets covering them, the gentle heat of the pavilion's air, the residual glow of deep rest that seemed to emanate from their own body, as if they had somehow absorbed light and peace and were now radiating it back out into the world. The traveler lay still, eyes closed, simply enjoying this experience of gentle awakening, this slow return to consciousness. There was no urgency, no need to leap up, to rush into the day, to immediately become functional and productive. They could simply be, simply notice, simply allow themselves to wake up in their own time, at their own pace. Gradually, they became aware of other sensations. The dream seed in their hand, no longer pulsing, but still warm, still present, a small solid thing that anchored them, that connected them to the garden's magic. The sound of soft breathing nearby, not their own, but someone else's. The caretaker, still keeping watch, still present, still offering their quiet guardianship. The traveler's eyelids fluttered, thinking about opening, but not quite ready yet. Behind their closed eyes, they could sense light, not bright, not harsh, but the gentle glow of the pavilion's lanterns, the soft luminescence that filled this space with warmth and safety. They took a deeper breath, and with it came a fuller awareness of their body. And what they felt was extraordinary. The pain was gone. The chronic ache in their lower back that had been their constant companion for years, gone. The tightness in their shoulders released. The knot between their shoulder blades dissolved. The tension in their neck, their jaw, their hands, all of it, simply not there anymore. But more than the absence of pain, there was a presence of something else. Vitality, perhaps. Ease. A sense of their body being fully their own again. No longer a burden to carry or manage, but a home to inhabit. A vessel that felt good to live in. That felt strong and capable and rested in a way they'd forgotten was possible. Their mind felt different too. Clear. Spacious. The endless loop of anxious thoughts, the constant background noise of worry and planning and second-guessing. It was quiet now. Not gone entirely perhaps, but distant, manageable, no longer overwhelming. There was space in their mind for peace, for presence, for simply experiencing this moment without immediately analyzing it or planning the next one. And their heart, their emotional self, that part that had been so weary, so heavy, so burdened, felt lighter, softer, more open. As if during sleep, someone had gently removed weights they'd been carrying, burdens they'd forgotten they'd picked up, sorrows they'd been holding onto without realizing they could let them go. The traveler's eyes finally opened, very slowly, lids lifting like curtains parting on a gentle dawn. The first thing they saw was the woven ceiling of the pavilion, glowing softly, creating patterns of light and shadow that were beautiful and soothing. They stared at it for a moment, simply looking, simply appreciating, simply being present to beauty without needing to do anything about it, without needing to capture it or possess it or make it into anything other than what it was. Then they turned their heads slightly and saw the caretaker, sitting on their cushion, watching with those kind, infinite eyes, smiling with such warmth and welcome that the traveler felt tears spring to their eyes. Happy tears this time, grateful tears, tears of relief and joy, and the overwhelming sense of being truly seen, truly known, truly cared for. "Welcome back," the caretaker said softly. "How do you feel?" The traveler considered this question, checking in with themselves, taking inventory. How did they feel? "Different," they said finally, their voice slightly rough from sleep but stronger than it had been in so long. "I feel lighter, clearer, like myself again, but a version of myself I'd forgotten existed." The caretaker's smile deepened. "That's the gift of true rest. It doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've always been beneath the exhaustion, beneath the burden, beneath everything you've been carrying that was never yours to carry." The traveler sat up slowly, and their body moved with an ease that astonished them. No stiffness, no pain, just smooth, natural movement, like their body had been oiled and tuned and returned to perfect working order. They looked down at their hand and saw the dream seed still resting there. It looked different now, dimmer, its work complete, ready to return to the earth and begin its cycle again. "May I?" the caretaker asked, gesturing to the seed. The traveler nodded and held out their hand. The caretaker took the seed gently, reverently, holding it for a moment before slipping it into a pocket of their luminous robes. "It will be planted beneath the heart tree," the caretaker explained. "In time, it will grow into a new dream-bearing tree, and its seeds will help others as this one helped you. The garden is always growing, always renewing, always preparing to offer its gifts to the next weary soul who finds the gate." The return to softness. The gate of return stood before the traveler, shimmering with the soft light of approaching dawn. Or perhaps it was the light of new beginnings, of restored souls, of the quiet magic that happens when someone has truly rested and is ready to return to their life, not as they were but as they've become. The traveler took a step toward the gate, then paused and turned back to the caretaker one more time. "Will I remember all of this?" they asked, a note of fear in their voice. "When I'm back in the world, will I remember how this felt? Will I remember the peace, the rest, the feeling of being held?" The caretaker smiled, that gentle, knowing smile that held centuries of wisdom, thousands of partings just like this one. "You will remember," they said softly. "Perhaps not every detail. Dreams fade, and in some ways the garden exists in that same space dreams do, between waking and sleeping, between real and imagined. But you'll remember what matters. You'll remember the feeling. You'll remember that rest is possible. You'll remember that you are worthy of peace. And whenever you need to recall it more fully, you have your lantern. You have the memory in your body, in your bones, in your heart. The garden leaves its mark on everyone who visits. You carry it with you now always. The traveler nodded, accepting this, trusting this. They touched the pocket where the small lantern rested, feeling its warmth through the fabric, its gentle glow that promised to light their way whenever darkness felt too heavy, whenever exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them again. "I won't say goodbye," the traveler said, "because I'll be back. When I need this again, and I know I will, I'll find the gate. I'll return. And I'll be here," the caretaker promised. "The garden is always here. The gate always opens for those who need it. Rest is always waiting for you, always ready to receive you, always prepared to hold you." The traveler turned back to the gate of return and placed their hand on its crystalline surface. It was cool to the touch but not cold, and it hummed very slightly like a tuning fork struck long ago and still vibrating with that initial note, that first pure sound. The gate began to open, not swinging like ordinary gates but dissolving, parting like mist, creating an opening that showed not the garden beyond but something else. The world they'd left, but seen through a soft filter, gentle and manageable, and somehow less frightening than it had seemed when they first found the garden. The traveler could see the path they'd walked to find the gate in the first place, the familiar world waiting just beyond. But the light was different now, softer, kinder. Or perhaps their eyes were different, able to see gentleness where before they'd only seen harshness, able to find beauty where before they'd only seen demands. "Go gently," the caretaker said, their voice already beginning to fade, growing distant as the world separated, as the garden released the traveler back to their life. "Be kind to yourself. Remember that you deserve rest. Remember that you are enough. Remember that you are loved. Remember." The traveler stepped through the gate, and the transition was smooth, seamless, like stepping from one room into another, like walking from darkness into dawn, like the gentlest awakening after the deepest sleep. And they found themselves standing on the path where they'd been walking what seemed like a lifetime ago, though perhaps it had only been a night. The path through the grove of trees, where the moon had been rising, where they'd been so tired, so weary, so desperately in need of rest. They turned to look back, wanting one more glimpse of the garden, one more sight of the caretaker, one more moment in that place of perfect peace. But the gate was gone. Or rather, it was there but invisible again, hidden behind the trailing willow branches and climbing roses, waiting for the next weary soul who would need it, who would see it appear under moonlight, who would be brave enough to walk through. The traveler stood very still for a moment, simply breathing, simply being, simply adjusting to being back in the ordinary world while carrying the extraordinary gift of what they'd experienced. And as they stood there, they became aware of several things. First, their body, still pain-free, still relaxed, still moving with that ease and grace that deep rest had restored. The healing wasn't just in the garden, they'd brought it back with them. It was real. It was lasting, at least for now, and when exhaustion crept back in, they knew what to do, knew where to return. Second, the world around them. It looked different. The same trees, the same path, the same moon now setting in the western sky, but all of it softer somehow, more beautiful, more bearable. The world hadn't changed, but their relationship to it had. They could see its beauty now, not just its demands. They could feel its support, not just its weight. Third, the lantern in their pocket, still glowing, still warm, still offering its gentle light. They drew it out and held it in their palm, watching its amber glow, feeling the peace it represented, the promise it held. You can rest, you can always rest, you deserve rest. Rest is not weakness but wisdom, not selfishness but survival, not luxury but necessity. The traveler began to walk, and walking felt different too. Not rushed, not burdened, just walking. One step, then another, moving forward not because they had to but because they could, because forward was a direction, and moving was what living things did, and there was no urgency, no pressure, just the simple act of being alive and moving through the world. The sky was beginning to lighten, true dawn approaching now, the first hints of color touching the eastern horizon. Rose and gold and the palest blue, the colors of new beginnings, of fresh starts, of the world being born again as it was born every morning, offering another chance, another day, another opportunity to live with presence and peace and the knowledge that rest was always possible. The traveler walked until they found a place where a large, smooth stone sat beside the path, the perfect height for sitting, positioned as if waiting for someone to stop and rest, to pause and be present, to remember that rushing wasn't necessary, that life could be lived at a pace that allowed for breathing, for noticing, for being. They sat, settling onto the stone, and it was warm from some source the traveler couldn't identify, comfortable in a way that reminded them of the garden, of the pavilion, of being held and cared for and allowed to rest. They held their lantern in both hands, watching its glow, and as they watched, images from the garden began to drift through their mind. Not sharply, not with perfect clarity, but in that soft, dreamlike way that important things are often remembered, in feelings more than facts, in impressions more than details. They remembered the starlight trees and their gentle rain of luminous particles. They remembered the whispering pools and the feeling of water washing away everything heavy. They remembered the lantern walk and the floating lights, each one representing someone who had rested before them, each one proof that they were not alone in their weariness. They remembered the heart tree, massive and ancient and full of compassion. They remembered the garden of soft shadows and the permission to fade, to be unseen, to rest in darkness without fear. They remembered the pavilion and the softest bed and the deepest sleep and the healing that happened in places beyond conscious knowing. They remembered the caretaker's kind eyes, their gentle voice, their patient presence. They remembered being told they were worthy of rest, deserving of peace, held by love that asked nothing in return. And as they remembered, they felt themselves relax even further, felt the peace of the garden settling more deeply into their being, becoming not just a memory, but a part of who they were now, how they moved through the world, how they treated themselves. The dawn continued to brighten, the sky shifting through its spectrum of colors, rose fading to gold, gold brightening to yellow, yellow washing into the pale blue of early morning. The stars were fading now, one by one, their work done for this night, their vigil complete. The moon had set, slipping below the horizon like a friend waving goodbye but promising to return, promising that night would come again, that rest would always be possible, that darkness was not an end, but a place where light could rest before rising again. Birds began to sing, tentatively at first, just one or two voices testing the morning, then more, then a chorus, welcoming the day with their music, with their joy, with their simple celebration of being alive and able to sing. The traveler listened to the birdsong and smiled. They felt like singing too, like celebrating, like expressing the joy and gratitude and relief that filled them. Relief at having found the garden, at having rested, at having been restored, at knowing they could return whenever they needed, at understanding finally that rest was not something they had to earn, but something they deserved simply by existing, simply by being human, simply by being alive. They sat on the warm stone as the world woke around them, holding their lantern, feeling peace in their body and mind and heart, and they knew deeply, knew certainly, knew beyond any doubt, that they were changed. That they would still get tired, still face challenges, still encounter days that were too long and demands that felt too heavy. But they would also remember. They would remember the gate. They would remember the garden. They would remember that rest was always waiting, always possible, always there when they needed it. And more than that, they would remember to be kind to themselves, to honor their tiredness instead of fighting it, to recognize exhaustion as a signal rather than a failure, to understand that rest was not weakness but strength, not selfishness but wisdom, not something to feel guilty about but something to celebrate as a necessary part of being human. The sun broke over the horizon, and the world was suddenly gilded with light, warm, golden, beautiful light that made everything glow, that transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, that reminded the traveler that magic existed not just in hidden gardens, but here too, in the everyday world, if you knew how to look, if you had eyes that had been opened by rest, by peace, by the profound gift of being allowed to stop. The travelers stood slowly, carefully tucking their lantern back into their pocket where it would stay close to their heart, where its gentle glow would remind them always of what they'd learned, what they'd experienced, what they now carried within them. They looked one more time at the place where the gate had been, invisible now in the morning light, but still there, still waiting, still ready to offer sanctuary to the next weary soul who needed it. "Thank you," the traveler whispered to the garden, to the gate, to the caretaker who was no longer visible but somehow still present, still watching, still sending love and blessing and the promise of welcome whenever the traveler needed to return. And then they turned and began to walk into the morning, into their life, into the world that waited with all its challenges and joys and ordinary moments that could be extraordinary if you were present enough to notice them, rested enough to appreciate them, peaceful enough to receive them. The traveler walked, and with each step they carried the garden with them, in their body that moved with ease, in their mind that was quiet and spacious, in their heart that was soft and open, in their pocket where the lantern glowed, in their soul where the memory of perfect rest lived like a warm coal that would never quite go out, that would always be there to kindle into flame whenever they needed warmth, whenever they needed light, whenever they needed to remember. The secret garden of starlight released them gently back into the world, but it never left them. It lived in them now. It was part of them, and they were part of it, woven into the fabric of peace that connected all who had ever rested there, all who had ever found the gate, all who had ever been brave enough to admit they were tired and needed somewhere safe to rest. The morning opened before them, bright and full of possibility. And the traveler walked into it, not with anxiety or dread, but with quiet confidence, with gentle strength, with the deep knowing that whatever came, they could face it, because they had learned the most important lesson of all. Rest is not the opposite of living. Rest makes living possible. Rest is sacred. Rest is necessary. Rest is always, always available. All you have to do is be brave enough to stop, to breathe, to let yourself be held, to remember that you deserve peace. Always. The traveler walked on, into the morning, into their life, into the beautiful, difficult, ordinary, extraordinary adventure of being alive. And in their pocket, their lantern glowed softly, steadily, constantly, a reminder that would never fade. You can rest. You are held. You are safe. You are enough. You are loved. Always. Sleep well, dear traveler. Sleep well. The end. May you find the gate whenever you need it. May you allow yourself the gift of deep rest. May you wake restored, renewed, and whole. Good night.